The moment the selection bell rang, every person in the hall rushed forward like their whole life depended on getting the flashiest weapon first. And honestly, it did. The gate above us was already open, burning blue across the ceiling like a crack in the sky. Beyond it, monsters were howling, floors were shaking, and the instructors were acting calm even though half of them had their hands on their swords. This was the first awakening trial, the day weak nobodies became hunters, raiders, duelists, or corpses with very dramatic last words. I was standing near the back, right where everyone expected me to be. My name was Jace, and until that day I was the guy nobody remembered unless they needed someone to blame. I was not the tallest, I was not the strongest, I was not the loudest. I had no famous family, no sponsored gear, no secret bloodline, no glowing dragon tattoo, and definitely no crowd cheering my name. What I did have was a bad habit of noticing things nobody else cared about. Like the way the weapon altar pulsed faster whenever someone touched it with fear. Like the way the best-looking weapons always had hidden cracks, as if the altar made them shine brighter to tempt idiots. Like the way the old instructor, Iris, kept watching the weakest students instead of the strongest ones. That told me one thing right away. The trial was not about grabbing the biggest weapon. It was about choosing something that would not betray you after the crowd stopped clapping. So while everyone ran for flame swords, thunder spears, shadow daggers, and glowing hammers, I walked slowly down the side aisle, ignoring every weapon that was screaming for attention. A guy with bright hair shoved past me and grabbed a giant sword taller than a door. The sword nearly pulled him face first into the floor, but he laughed like that was a feature. Cole got a spear that split into 3 blades. Of course he did. Cole had been my problem since the first day I entered the academy. He was not built like a walking fortress or dressed like a metal wall. He was worse. He was fast, sharp, and annoying, the kind of guy who could insult you, kick your ankle, and make the instructor think you had tripped over your own feet. He spun his new spear once, and the air cracked like thunder. Then he looked at me. I already knew the smile before he spoke. He asked if I was shopping for a broom. People laughed. I kept walking. That was the first rule I learned in a world full of people with weapons. Never waste energy answering someone who has already decided you are weak. Let them keep that belief warm. You might need it later. At the very end of the altar, almost hidden behind a broken shield and a pile of bent practice swords, I saw a leather quiver. Not a bow. Not arrows. Just a quiver. It was black, old, scratched, and completely empty. No glow, no smoke, no dramatic halo from above. It looked like something a tired janitor forgot to throw away. But the altar around it was silent. Every other weapon begged for attention. This thing waited. I touched it. The hall went quiet for half a second, and then a small panel of light opened in front of me. Infinite Quiver. Stores arrows. That was it. No damage number, no special attack, no elemental blessing, no heroic title, just stores arrows. For a second I stared at it, and I could practically hear fate laughing at me. Then everyone else did it out loud. Cole bent over like he had been stabbed by comedy. Someone asked where my bow was. Someone else said maybe I could throw the quiver at enemies and hope they died of pity. Even the guy with the giant sword stopped struggling long enough to laugh. Iris did not laugh. That mattered. So I slung the quiver over my shoulder. The system light blinked once, like it had accepted my stupidity as official. I looked around the hall full of shining weapons and smiling idiots, and I smiled too. Because the panel had said stores arrows. It had not said only arrows. The first gate pulled us in before the mockery could get boring. The hall folded sideways, and the academy disappeared in a burst of blue fire. My stomach flipped, my feet hit stone, and suddenly we were standing inside a ruined city under a fake purple sky. The trial zone. Broken towers leaned over us. Black grass grew between cracked streets. Far away, something heavy dragged claws across stone. Every student received a bright weapon in their hands. I received a quiver on my back and the honor of being useless. The first monsters came running before anyone formed a plan. They were small gray things with long arms and wide mouths full of needle teeth. Not strong alone, but there were dozens of them, and they moved like someone spilled a bag of knives across the street. The students with weapons charged. For about 10 seconds, they looked incredible. Flame swords carved red arcs, spears flashed, hammers smashed. The guy with the giant sword managed one heroic swing, missed everything, and fell on his back. Then the monsters reached the gaps. Suddenly, the perfect formation became screaming, shoving, and people trying not to die in the most embarrassing way possible. Cole was doing fine because he was actually talented, which made him even more irritating. His triple spear stabbed 3 monsters at once, and he had time to glance at me like he expected to see my funeral already happening. I was crouched beside a broken market stall. Not hiding. Collecting. There were loose stones everywhere, rusted nails, shards of tile, broken knives from some dead soldier who had probably made better choices than me. I pulled the quiver off my shoulder and dropped a small stone inside. It vanished. No sound. No weight. No bottom. My heart kicked once. I dropped in another stone, then a nail, then a knife. All vanished. I reached inside. My fingers touched nothing, but in my mind I felt a list forming. Stone, nail, knife. The quiver was not empty. It was hungry. A monster leaped over the stall and landed right in front of me, mouth open, claws raised, probably excited to become the first creature in history to kill a man armed with luggage. I grabbed the rusted knife from the quiver. Except I did not pull it out with my hand. The quiver launched it. Knife shot forward with a silver streak, spinning like an arrow fired from an invisible bow, and buried itself straight through the monster's open mouth. It flew backward, nailed to the wall behind it, and slid down with a confused squeak. For a second, even the monsters paused. I looked at the quiver. Then I looked at the entire ruined city, full of throwable garbage. And I started laughing. Not loud, not crazy, just enough that the nearest student heard me and backed away like I had become a bigger problem than the monsters. I fed the quiver everything I could grab. Rocks, bricks, broken glass, forks from a collapsed tavern, a chair leg, another knife, a monster tooth after I kicked one in the jaw and stole it while it was still falling. Every object vanished into the quiver, and every time I reached for it with my mind, it came back as a projectile, not thrown, fired, fast, straight, sharp with intent. The next monster lunged at me from the left. I fired a brick into its forehead, so hard it folded backward like a door with bad hinges. Another tried to crawl up a wall, so I launched 3 nails into its fingers and made it drop into Cole's spear path. A third opened its mouth to scream, and I fired the fork. I still remember the sound. It was not heroic. It was deeply funny. Cole shouted at me to stop throwing trash near him. I told him to stop standing near my targets. Then the first large monster appeared. It crawled out from behind a tower, twice the size of a horse, with a skull-shaped head and arms long enough to sweep across the whole street. The system panel called it a gutter brute. Most students saw that name and panicked. I saw 2 things. First, its eyes were protected by bone ridges. Second, its mouth had gaps between the teeth. I did not have enough power to pierce its skull, not with rocks, not with nails, not yet. So I did something stupid and clever, which was my favorite combination. I ran straight at it. The brute roared and swung. I slid under its arm, grabbed a shattered bottle from the ground, shoved it into the quiver, and fired it upward the moment I rolled behind the monster. The bottle flew into its mouth and shattered in the soft back of its throat. It gagged. I fired 3 stones into the same spot. It gagged harder. Then I fired the chair leg like a spear. The brute stumbled, clawed at its mouth, and crashed through the market stall. Students scattered. Cole cursed. Iris, watching from a high balcony like this was a casual afternoon show, leaned forward. The brute was not dead, but it was angry. Good. Angry things stop thinking. I sprinted past it toward a row of hanging iron signs. The monster chased me, smashing through walls. I fired nails into the cracked supports above the street, not at the brute, but around it. The signs loosened. The brute charged under them. Then I fired a rock at the last chain. The entire row of iron signs fell at once, slamming onto its spine. It hit the ground with a roar so loud the fake sky flickered. Cole jumped on the opening and stabbed it through the neck. The brute dissolved into black sparks. Cole landed beside me, breathing hard, and for one tiny second, he looked like he wanted to say something decent. Then he saw me grin. He said I got lucky. I told him luck must have really good aim. The trial ended with half the students injured, one guy crying into his giant sword, and me standing in the middle of the ruins with an empty-looking quiver that now contained half a city. When we returned to the academy hall, the laughter was different. People still laughed, but now it had cracks in it. Nobody wanted to admit the useless quiver had scored more kills than most legendary weapons. Nobody wanted to admit the guy they mocked had turned a pile of street trash into a storm of murder confetti. So they pretended it was a fluke. That was fine. Flukes are very comfortable places to hide. Iris stopped me before I left the hall. She looked at my quiver, then at my hands, then at the dried monster blood on my sleeve. She told me I had chosen a strange weapon. I told her it chose a strange owner. She almost smiled. Then she said the first trial only proved I could survive chaos. The second trial would prove whether I could fight someone who understood me. Behind her, Cole spun his spear and smiled like a knife. I knew exactly who she meant. The second trial was a duel arena. No monsters, no ruins, no broken market stalls full of convenient garbage, just a circular platform, an audience full of students, and a weapon check that made my life immediately annoying. The arena attendants took away anything that was not registered gear. My pockets were emptied. No rocks, no knives, no nails, no little surprises. Cole walked onto the platform with his triple spear shining, clearly trying not to look too excited about humiliating me in public. I walked on with a quiver and no bow. The audience remembered how funny that was and started laughing again. I looked up at Iris. She gave no reaction. That confirmed it. This was not Cole's test. It was mine. The bell rang. Cole vanished. Not literally, but close enough. His weapon burst into 3 spearheads, and he rushed me with a zigzag step that made the air pop. A normal person would have tried to dodge backward. I stepped forward. That confused him for half a heartbeat. Half a heartbeat was a long time when your opponent was arrogant. His first spearhead skimmed my shoulder. The second cut my sleeve. The third would have stabbed my thigh, but I twisted, caught the shaft under my arm, and let him keep moving. He was faster, stronger, better trained. So I did not fight him. I made him carry me. Cole dragged me half a step before realizing I had hooked my elbow around his spear. I kicked the platform, swung around his body, and slammed my knee into his ribs. It did almost nothing, but the audience gasped because weak people are not supposed to move toward pain. He threw me off. I hit the arena floor, rolled, and stood up smiling. Cole got mad. Perfect. He attacked harder. Every thrust was sharp enough to punch holes in stone. I dodged what I could, took shallow cuts when I had to, and kept moving in a circle. To the audience, it looked like I was barely surviving. To me, I was shopping. The arena floor was made of layered stone tiles. Every time Cole missed, his spear carved chips out of the ground. Tiny fragments bounced loose around my feet. A normal quiver stored arrows. Mine stored anything I put inside. But did I need my hands? That was the question. During the first trial, I had physically dropped objects into it. But in the duel, when my back brushed the floor during a roll, I felt the quiver drink in dust and loose stone without me touching them. It was slow, like breathing through a straw, but it worked. So I kept rolling. Cole thought he was pressuring me. He was feeding me ammunition. After a minute, I had enough. Cole lunged with a clean finishing thrust aimed right at my chest. The crowd held its breath. I could almost hear him preparing a speech. I twisted sideways and lifted my right hand like I was drawing an invisible bowstring. The quiver answered. Stone dust fired out in a narrow blast. Not a rock, not a bullet. A gray flash of powdered arena tile blasted into Cole's eyes. He shouted, blinded for 1 second. I used that second like it was a treasure chest. I fired stone chips into his knuckles, his elbow, the back of his knee, and the hinge where his spear split into 3. Each shot was small but precise. His hand loosened, his balance dipped. His weapon jammed halfway open. Then I grabbed the spear shaft, stepped behind him, and fired one last tile shard into the floor at his heel. He slipped. I kicked his wrist. The triple spear flew out of his hand, spun through the air, and landed outside the ring. The arena went silent. I did not hit him again. I just stood over him with my empty hand aimed at his face. The quiver hummed behind me like a sleeping beast. Cole blinked through tears of stone dust and looked up at me like the world had made a mistake. I told him he could surrender, or I could reload him with the floor. He surrendered. Nobody laughed when I left the platform. That was when the academy started calling me dangerous. Not strong, not talented, dangerous. I liked that word better. Strong makes people challenge you. Dangerous makes them wonder what you are holding when your hands are empty. After the duel, students stopped throwing insults directly at me. They whispered them instead, which was honestly more polite. Cole avoided my eyes for 3 days, then started training twice as hard. That should have been the end of our little rivalry, but life in a tower world never lets anything end cleanly. The academy announced the first real dungeon assignment at sunrise. Teams of 5 would enter a forest gate, gather monster cores, and return before nightfall. Simple, safe, controlled. Anytime an instructor says safe, prepare to blood. I was assigned to a team that did not want me. Cole was there too, which made the air taste like old sparks. The other students had better weapons, louder confidence, and the survival instincts of decorative fruit. Before the gate opened, Iris walked past us and stopped beside me. She asked if I had obtained a bow yet. I said no. She asked if that worried me. I said only for everyone else. That time she did smile. Then the forest gate swallowed us. The dungeon looked beautiful in the way poisonous things often do. Silver trees, blue leaves, mist glowing between roots, tiny lights drifting in the air like fireflies made of glass. The first student said it looked peaceful. A vine immediately grabbed him by the ankle and tried to feed him to a tree. I fired a stone from the quiver and cut the vine in half before anyone else moved. The student landed on his face and I stepped over him. The forest was not peaceful. It was pretending. That meant I understood it already. The first hour was easy because I made it easy. I collected everything: thorns, bark chips, glowing mushrooms, pebbles, dead vines, sticky sap, a beetle shell the size of my hand. I fed all of it into the quiver, while the others complained that I was wasting time. They wanted to hunt monsters. I wanted the forest to become my weapon. We found the first nest near a stream of black water. Wolf-like monsters with antlers made of bone were sleeping around glowing cores. The team wanted to charge in, which was brave if you consider getting eaten a form of confidence. I stopped them. They ignored me. So I let them go. That was another rule I learned early. You cannot stop every idiot from touching fire. Sometimes you just stand close enough to cook something when they do. The moment they attacked, the sleeping monsters opened their eyes. There were not 6. There were 20. The ground around the nest cracked and more crawled out from under roots. The team formation broke instantly. One student got knocked into the stream. Another lost his weapon. Cole held his ground better than the rest, but even he looked surprised. I waited until the monsters surrounded them. Then I fired sticky sap at the ground. It hit like golden arrows and exploded into glue. Monster paws stuck. Then I fired thorn volleys into the trapped legs, not deep enough to kill, deep enough to make them thrash. The trapped monsters blocked the ones behind them, turning their own pack into a wall. Cole saw the opening and moved. Good, he was annoying, but he was not stupid. He carved through 3 monsters with his spear, while I fired beetle shells like spinning shields, knocking antlers aside before they stabbed anyone. A vine monster rose from the stream behind us, silent and huge, but I had already seen its reflection. I fired a glowing mushroom into its mouth. The mushroom burst into blue spores. The vine monster sneezed. Then it kept sneezing. A monster made of murder branches stood there helpless, shaking with magical allergies, while Cole stared like he could not decide whether to thank me or pretend he had planned it. I fired a sharpened bone antler into its core and ended the debate. By noon, we had enough monster cores to pass. By afternoon, the dungeon decided passing was rude. The sky darkened, the silver trees bent inward, the exit gate flickered on the map and disappeared. One of the students said the gate was malfunctioning. I told him gates do not malfunction, they lie. That was when the forest started hunting us properly. The safe path vanished, the black stream split into 5 rivers, the mist grew faces that copied our voices, every direction led back to the same clearing with the same dead tree in the center. The team panicked. I watched the dead tree. Every time we returned, one branch changed position. Not much, just enough. The forest was rotating around that tree like a lock. So I shot it. Not with a stone, not with a thorn. With a core. Everyone yelled because monster cores were our score, our proof, our reward. I ignored them and fired a glowing core straight into the dead tree's hollow center. The clearing screamed. Bark split open like a mouth, and a huge wooden face pushed out, furious that someone had fed it the one thing it could not digest. The forest guardian woke up. It was taller than the academy tower, with root legs, branch arms, and a crown of skull-shaped flowers. The system panel named it a silverwood devourer. The students froze. Cole whispered that we were dead. I said not yet. The guardian raised one arm and the entire clearing became spears. Roots burst from the ground, branches stabbed downward, flowers sprayed sleep dust. It attacked from every direction at once. So I stopped thinking like a fighter. I thought like a thief. What did the guardian own? Roots, branches, poison flowers, a whole forest. Wonderful. I started stealing pieces. Every time a root missed me, I cut off the tip and fed it to the quiver. Every time a branch broke, I stored the splinters. When sleep dust drifted close, I used my cloak to scoop it and shove the cloth into the quiver. The others fought to survive. I fought to build an inventory. The guardian got angrier. Anger makes giants generous. It slammed both arms down, trying to crush us. I fired the sticky sap under Cole's boots and yanked him backward with a chain vine I had stored earlier. He slid out from under the impact right before the ground shattered. He looked at me like he hated owing me his life. I told him to pay me back by stabbing the glowing cracks. He did. For the first time, we moved like a team. He cut openings with raw speed. I turned every opening into a disaster. I fired sleep dust into the guardian's own flowers, making them droop. I launched root tips back into the roots that birthed them, pinning them together. I fired black water into the cracks Cole made, and the liquid burned like acid inside the wood. But the guardian's core was hidden deep inside its chest. Too deep for anything I had. Then I looked at the stream. Black water carried stones polished smooth by poison, heavy, dense, soaked in whatever made the river burn. I sprinted toward it. The guardian saw me and raised a wall of roots. I fired thorn clusters into the ground, then jumped onto them like steps, bouncing higher than I had any right to. A branch swept at my waist. I fired beetle shells under my feet and rode them through the air like spinning platforms. Was it graceful? No. Did it look ridiculous? Absolutely. Did everyone stop screaming long enough to watch me surf through a death forest on bug armor? Yes. I landed at the stream, plunged the quiver into the water, and felt it drink. Not a cup. Not a bottle. The whole current. The quiver shook against my back. My bones vibrated. The list in my mind filled with black water arrows, hundreds of them, each one burning with poison. The guardian roared and charged. I turned around, lifted my hand, and fired the river. The black line tore across the clearing like a dragon made of ink. It drilled into the guardian's chest, burned through layers of bark, and exposed a bright green core beating inside. Cole moved before I told him. He hurled his spear. I fired a chain vine after it, wrapped the spear midair, and pulled with everything I had, increasing its spin. The spear became a silver drill. It punched straight through the core. The guardian exploded into leaves, light, and very satisfying revenge. The exit gate opened above the dead tree. When we returned to the academy, we had fewer cores than the other teams because I had used some as bait, bombs, and emotional support for angry trees. But we had a guardian core. Iris held it in one hand and stared at me. The other instructors looked uncomfortable. Guardian monsters were not supposed to appear in beginner dungeons. Nobody said the word safe again. Our team passed with the highest score. Cole did not congratulate me, but he did return the stone chips he had found stuck in his boot after our duel. He said I might need them. That was the closest thing to friendship he could manage without choking. I took them. Of course I took them. Ammunition is ammunition. The academy gave me a new rank, a small room, and a warning not to store unstable dungeon materials indoors. Naturally, I stored unstable dungeon materials indoors. The problem with power is that people only respect it after they imagine stealing it. 3 nights after the forest dungeon, someone broke into my room. Not students. Professionals. They moved too quietly, picked the lock too cleanly, and carried sleeping powder strong enough to knock out an ogre. I was lying in bed with my eyes closed, listening to them search my desk, my trunk, and the space under my mattress. They were looking for the quiver. The quiver was under my blanket, hugging my ribs like a very dangerous pillow. One thief whispered that Drake would pay extra if it was undamaged. That was the first time I heard Drake's name. I did not know his face yet, but I knew his type. Every academy had someone outside the walls who smiled at talented kids and turned them into tools. Every dungeon city had a collector who wanted rare weapons more than he wanted laws, morals, or fingers. They wanted my quiver. So I gave them a performance. I let one thief pull the blanket back. He saw me awake. I saw his soul leave early. Before he could shout, I fired a pillow. That sounds harmless until a quiver turns it into a compressed projectile, moving fast enough to knock a man into a bookshelf. The pillow hit him in the chest with a soft, stupid thump, and he folded over like he had been struck by a polite cannon. The second thief threw a knife. I opened the quiver's pull field. The knife curved in midair and vanished into the quiver before it reached me. Then I fired it back handle first into his forehead. He dropped. The third thief tried to run. I fired my blanket. It wrapped around his legs midair, spun him upside down, and pinned him to the ceiling beam. For a moment my room was silent, except for the upside-down thief groaning through fabric. Then the academy guards burst in. Iris entered behind them, hair tied back, eyes cold enough to frost glass. She looked at the thieves, then at the hole in my bookshelf, then at me sitting calmly on my bed with no blanket. She asked if I was hurt. I said only emotionally, because that pillow had been comfortable. Guards took the thieves away, and Iris told me Drake was not a student problem. He ran a raider crew outside the academy, one that specialized in stealing awakened weapons from new hunters. She told me to stay inside protected grounds. That was good advice. So naturally, I left the next morning. Not because I was brave. Because if Drake wanted the quiver, he would keep sending people. If I waited, he would choose the battlefield. If I moved first, I could choose it for him. And I had the perfect place. The old market district outside the academy walls was full of broken stalls, hanging ropes, alleyways, loose bricks, and people who assumed a kid with a quiver and no bow was easy money. Basically paradise. I spent the morning shopping without buying anything. I collected bent spoons from trash bins, cracked tiles from rooftops, old fishhooks from a dock, empty bottles from tavern steps, and 3 bags of flour from a baker who owed me nothing and received a very confusing compliment in return. I borrowed a coil of chain from a blacksmith's scrap pile after asking politely with my face and not asking at all with my hands. By noon, I was standing in an alley pretending to look lost. It took Drake's men 12 minutes to find me. That was insulting. 6 of them entered the alley from both sides, no names worth remembering, no style worth describing, just sharp weapons, greedy eyes, and the confidence of people who thought numbers were a personality. One of them told me to hand over the quiver. I looked around at the alley walls. Then I asked if they were sure they wanted to start here. They laughed. I love when people laugh before walking into a trap. It gives the moment rhythm. First man rushed with a hook blade. I fired flour into his face, not a bag of flour. A quiver-shot flour burst so dense it turned his whole head into a white cloud. He swung blind, hit the wall, and stumbled. I fired fishhooks into his sleeves and pinned him to the wood. The second man tried to flank me. I fired a chain. The quiver launched it like a silver serpent. It wrapped around his ankles, yanked, then hooked onto a balcony rail. He swung upward, crashed into a hanging sign, and dangled there like a punishment decoration. The third and fourth attacked together. I fired empty bottles at the ground between them. The glass shattered, and before they could step back, I fired black river water from the forest dungeon. It spread across the glass, sizzling, not enough to kill, just enough to turn the floor into a very strong argument against moving. They froze. I fired 2 pillows I had stolen from my own room. Both went down. Yes, I had reloaded pillows. A great hunter respects all ammunition. The last 2 were smarter. They did not rush. One threw smoke, the other climbed the wall to attack from above. I let the smoke cover me. Then I fired glowing mushroom spores from inside it. The whole alley became blue fog. The man in the smoke began sneezing so violently, he dropped his sword and begged the air to stop existing. The climber above me leaped down, blade first. I fired a brick straight up. It hit him in the stomach, changed his direction from downward assassin to horizontal furniture, and sent him through a stack of crates. When the city guards arrived, all 6 men were tied, pinned, hanging, or emotionally reconsidering their lives. Iris appeared with them because of course she did. She said she had followed me in case I did something reckless. I told her I had done something strategic. She looked at the man dangling from the sign. She said strategy was one word for it. Guards took Drake's men to jail, and for the first time, the city heard rumors about the Quiver Kid who turned an alley into a carnival of pain. Drake heard too. That was the point. 2 days later, I received an invitation. Not a contract, not a letter full of legal nonsense, just a black card with a silver mark in one sentence. Bring the quiver to the pit tonight, or people around you get hurt. I burned the card. Then I went to the pit. Not because I obeyed threats. Because threats are just directions written by arrogant people. The pit was an underground fighting ring beneath an abandoned bathhouse, the kind of place where the crowd smelled like cheap smoke and bad decisions. A circular arena sat in the middle, surrounded by cages, weapon racks, and gamblers whispering over coins. Drake was waiting on the far balcony. He was not huge, he did not wear giant armor. He did not need to. He had the calm smile of a man who believed everyone else in the room was already his property. Dark hair, white gloves, a curved sword at his waist. Eyes that measured price before danger. He welcomed me like I was an honored guest. I counted exits. 4 visible. 2 hidden. 1 skylight above the arena. 37 weapons in racks. 11 chains on caged doors. 6 lanterns burning oil. A sand floor. Excellent. Drake said he admired rare talent. He said my quiver was wasted at the academy. He said he could make me rich, feared, respected. I asked if this speech had ever worked. His smile thinned. Then the cages opened. 3 monsters stepped into the pit. They were not wild dungeon beasts. They had collars burned into their necks and scars from training. Drake had been keeping monsters for entertainment. That made things simple. I could tolerate thieves. I could not tolerate people who turned monsters into torture toys and humans into bait. The first creature was a plated hound with metal spines. The second was a red-eyed ape with stone fists. The third was a serpent with wings folded along its back. The crowd cheered. Drake said if I survived, we could talk again. I said we were already done talking. The hound charged first. I fired sand. The quiver turned a handful into a slicing stream that blasted under the hound's front legs. It skidded. I fired chain links into the floor around it, forming a loop. Then I fired the chain itself, and the links connected midair, snapping into a restraint around its body. The hound crashed and slid. The ape jumped over it. I fired an oil lantern. Not at the ape. At the ceiling above it. The lantern smashed, oil raining down. The ape twisted to avoid fire that was not there yet. While it was looking up, I fired 3 monster teeth into the pressure points under its arm. The ape hit the ground numb on one side. The serpent finally moved. It unfolded its wings and shot across the arena with its mouth open, venom dripping like green glass. I waited until I saw the muscles in its jaw tighten. Then I fired the pillow. The crowd saw a pillow hit a flying venom serpent in the face and stop it like a thrown mattress from heaven. It fell. I fired black water into its wings, pinning them to the sand with acid smoke. The arena went quiet. Drake stopped smiling. I looked up at him and pointed to the cages. Then I fired the collars. Not all at once, carefully, precisely. I fired sharpened fragments at the lock pins on each monster's collar. 1, 2, 3. The collars cracked and fell away. The monsters froze. Drake's men shouted. The hound looked at me. I raised both hands and stepped back. Then I fired the broken collars at Drake's balcony. They struck the railing like warning bells. The monsters understood enough. They did not attack me. They attacked the men who had caged them. Chaos exploded through the pit. The crowd ran for exits. Drake's fighters tried to control the beasts, but terrified people with whips are very bad at looking innocent. The hound slammed through the weapon rack. The ape tore open cages. The serpent flew up to the balcony and spat venom across Drake's escape path. Drake drew his sword for the first time. It was not ordinary. The blade bent light around it, leaving afterimages that cut a second after the first swing. A delay blade, dangerous. Good. I wanted to see what he was hiding. He jumped from the balcony and landed in the arena, calm again, as if losing control was just another style choice. He moved fast. Faster than Cole. His first slash missed my neck by an inch, but the afterimage cut my collar. His second slash I dodged, and the delayed strike opened a line across my arm. If I kept treating his sword like one blade, I would lose. So I stopped watching the sword. I watched his wrist. Weapons lie. Bodies confess. Drake liked to flick his wrist before the delayed cut activated. Tiny habit, almost invisible, enough. He rushed me again. I fired sand into his shoes. He ignored it. I fired chains at his arms. He cut them. I fired a stool from the spectator seats. He sliced it into 4 pieces and kept coming. Then I fired the 4 pieces back. He dodged 3. The 4th hit his wrist. His delayed slash went wide. I stepped into his space and shoved my quiver against his sword hilt. The quiver drank the weapon. Drake's hand closed on empty air. His face challenged. Not fear. Insult. Like I had stolen the sun. I fired his own sword into the sand beside his foot, burying it up to the handle. Then I fired chains around his wrists, ankles, waist, and neck, pinning him to the arena floor in a very uncomfortable star shape. City guards stormed in through the exits because Iris had tipped them off before I arrived. I had known she would follow. She had known I knew. That was the closest thing we had to teamwork. Drake looked up at me while the guards dragged his men away and his monsters escaped into holding barriers outside. He told me I had made an enemy. I told him no, I had made evidence. They took him to jail with the others. The crowd would later tell the story badly. They said I had walked into an underground arena, defeated 3 monsters, stole a cursed sword mid-duel, freed the beasts, and gift-wrapped a criminal crew for the guards. That was mostly true. They forgot the pillow. History often disrespects the most important weapons. After the pit, everything changed too quickly. The academy could not pretend I was a joke anymore. Other students started watching me train. Instructors started asking for demonstrations. Weapon Hall recorded my quiver as a rare evolving relic, which sounded impressive until someone asked what it evolved into, and the answer was still apparently storage. But I knew the truth. The quiver was waking up. At first, it only stored things I placed inside. Then it accepted things touching my back. Then it drank loose dust, water, and fragments through contact. After the pit, it began remembering shapes. That happened during a training session with Logan. Logan was the Academy's unofficial gear genius, a messy-haired craftsman who lived in the workshop basement and treated explosions like punctuation. He was not a hunter, not exactly. He made weapons, broke them, fixed them, and occasionally apologized to walls. I went to him for a bow. He laughed for almost a full minute. Not cruelly, scientifically. He said building a bow for my quiver was like building a spoon for a hurricane. Then he did it anyway. The first bow snapped after 3 shots. The second bow caught fire. The third bow fired backward and knocked Logan into a barrel. The fourth one survived long enough for me to test a normal arrow. The quiver accepted the arrow like it was bored. Then I loaded a knife. The bowstring became heavy, not physically, mentally, like the world itself was asking if I was sure. I pulled. The knife flew faster than before, wrapped in a thin line of white light. It pierced 3 target dummies and embedded itself in the stone wall behind them. Logan sat up from behind the barrel and whispered that we were going to need a bigger wall. With a bow, the quiver changed. Everything became more stable, faster, sharper. Rocks flew like cannon shots. Chains flew straight until I commanded them to curve. Potions shattered exactly where I wanted. Scrolls unrolled midair. Monster teeth spun like drills. The bow gave the quiver a direction. But the quiver gave everything else a purpose. I trained for days without sleeping much. Logan built bows, I broke bows. Iris watched and corrected my stance. Cole pretended not to watch, then asked if the chain shots could pull enemies off balance. I said yes. He asked if they could pull allies forward. I said only if the ally trusted me. He told me not to get sentimental. Then he let me fire a chain around his waist and launch him across the training field like a spear with opinions. He crashed into a target, destroyed it, and stood up smiling. That was when I realized something dangerous. My quiver did not just fire weapons. It fired strategies. If I stored a chain, I could control distance. If I stored potions, I could create zones. If I stored monster parts, I could mimic their traits. If I stored a person's weapon for even 1 second, I could return it faster than they could understand. And if I stored enough different things, my enemy could never know what kind of fight they were in until it was already over. The Academy ranking tournament arrived 1 week later. Students treated it like a festival. I treated it like a shopping trip with applause. The tournament had simple rules: fight until surrender, ring out, or inability to continue. No killing, personal weapons allowed, dungeon materials allowed if approved. I had a quiver packed with rocks, chains, smoke bombs, glue sap, black water vials, monster teeth, training arrows, a delay sword I had been allowed to keep as evidence after Drake's arrest, and 3 pillows because I respected tradition. My first opponent brought twin flame axes. Very dramatic. He spun them until the arena heated up and the audience cheered. I fired a potion of slick frost at his feet. He slid across the platform, arms still spinning, and left the ring like a flaming windmill. Match over. My second opponent used a shadow cloak to vanish. The crowd gasped when he disappeared. I fired flour across the arena. His invisible footsteps became white puffs. Then I fired a pillow into the largest puff. He reappeared outside the ring with flour on his face and betrayal in his eyes. Match over. My third opponent used a sonic hammer that shattered projectiles midair. That was actually a problem. Anything I fired directly would break. So I fired around him. First chains into the floor behind him, then black water to make him move forward, then beetle shells to bounce off the arena shield. The shells curved behind him like skipping stones. He smashed the ones he saw. He did not see the chain tighten behind his knees. I pulled. He fell backward. His hammer boomed into the sky. I fired a harmless training arrow into his sleeve and pinned him to the floor. Match over. By the time I reached the semifinals, the audience was no longer asking whether I could win. They were guessing what stupid object would ruin someone's life next. Cole met me in the semifinal. The arena changed for us. Not because the environment reacted to me. Tournament officials chose a wider platform with stone pillars because they wanted a better fight, and because everyone secretly wanted to see whether Cole could finally shut me up. He walked in with his triple spear, no grin this time. I walked in with Logan's fifth bow, which had warning marks carved along the limbs and a small note that said not to point it at anything emotionally important. Cole attacked the instant the bell rang. No speech. Good. He had learned. His spear split into 3 blades, then 9 light traces, each one stabbing from a different angle. I fired stone chips to deflect the first wave, but he twisted through them. I fired chains to slow him, but he cut the links before they wrapped. I fired smoke, but he blew it aside with a spinning spear sweep. Cole had watched every trick. That was fine. Old tricks are bait for new tricks. I fired a knife at his shoulder. He knocked it away. I fired a second knife at his knee. He dodged. I fired a third knife at his spear. He parried and rushed in, exactly as expected. Because the knives were not attacks. They were anchors. Each knife had a thin chain attached, so thin it looked like light. When Cole passed between them, I pulled all 3 chains at once. The knives snapped back, not toward me, but toward each other, forming a triangle cage around his spear arm. Cole reacted instantly. He let go of the spear with one hand, spun under the chains, and kicked the floor to launch himself sideways. For most fighters, that would have escaped the trap. For me, it gave me a moving target with no footing. I fired a gust potion under him. The potion burst and launched him higher. Then I fired a chain around his waist. The audience thought I was pulling him down. No, I pulled him sideways. Cole became a human meteor. He crashed through the first stone pillar, used his spear to vault off the second, and somehow landed on his feet, laughing like a maniac. That was new. Cole was enjoying this. He charged again, and for the first time I felt pressure that made my hands sweat. He feinted high, stabbed low, reversed the spear, and struck the bow itself. Logan's 5th bow cracked. The audience gasped. Cole's eyes sharpened. He had found the weakness. The quiver was insane, but the bow was not. He attacked the bow again and again. I blocked with beetle shells, dodged behind pillars, fired glue sap to slow him, but he kept closing the gap. My shots needed rhythm. He broke the rhythm. Then the bow snapped. Half the arena stood up. Cole's spear stopped an inch from my chest. He thought it was over. So did everyone else. Even I had half a heartbeat of panic. Then the quiver pulsed. Not on my back. Inside my spine. The broken bow fragments in my hand dissolved into light and vanished into the quiver. I felt a new item appear in the list. Broken bow. I almost laughed. Cole saw my face and realized something terrible. I raised my empty hand. The quiver fired the broken bow. But it did not fire it as wood. It fired the memory of the bow's shape, curved and glowing, forming a temporary arc of light in front of my hand. For 1 second, I had a bow made from the broken bow itself. I pulled an invisible string. Everything in the quiver screamed forward. Not all at once. Just enough. Stone chips, chain links, monster teeth, and a burst of flour fired in a spinning helix around Cole. He blocked the sharp shots, dodged the chains, but the flower cloud covered his sight for the smallest instant. Inside that instant, I fired the delay sword. Not the blade. The afterimage. The first strike passed beside him harmlessly. He dodged it on instinct. The delayed cut tapped the floor behind his heel, cracking the stone. Cole stepped back onto the crack. I fired a black water drop into it. The floor popped. He lost balance. I fired a pillow into his chest. He flew out of the ring. The arena went silent. Then it exploded. People shouted, some laughed, some screamed that it was unfair. Logan fell off his bench laughing. Iris closed her eyes like she was praying for patience. Cole lay outside the ring, staring at the sky. Then he started laughing too. He called me a menace. I told him that was almost a compliment. The final match should have been harder. It was not. My opponent was stronger than me, faster than me, and carried a wind blade that could cut at range. He had spent the whole tournament overwhelming people with raw pressure. Raw pressure is impressive until it meets someone who brought glue. I fired sap into the wind currents, turning invisible blades into sticky golden arcs. Then I fired chains into the sap, anchored them to the arena pillars, and created a net he could not see until he ran into it face first. He tried to cut free. I fired the delay sword into his own wind, making the afterimage slash the net tighter. He surrendered while hanging upside down. I became Academy champion. The same people who laughed at my quiver were now chanting my name. It felt good. I will not pretend it did not. But applause is just another kind of noise, useful for hiding footsteps. And while everyone cheered, I saw Iris at the edge of the arena, speaking quietly to a guard. Drake had escaped jail. The city tried to keep it quiet. That was adorable. By midnight, every hunter in the academy knew. Drake had not broken out by force. Someone had slipped a monster tooth key into his cell, and he walked out through 3 locked doors like smoke. 2 guards were alive but cursed asleep. His old crew remained in custody, which meant he had new allies, or worse, he had saved his best ones for later. Iris told me to stay under guard. I said no. She said that was not a request. I said I knew. We stared at each other for a long moment. Then she asked what I intended to do. I told her I intended to make myself very easy to find. That is how I ended up walking alone through the Lantern District with the Academy Champion medal hanging from my neck like bait. The city at night was a maze of orange lights, wet rooftops, and alleys that smelled like rain and fried meat. People saw me and whispered. Some pointed. Some ran ahead to tell friends the Quiver champion was outside. Good. Rumors move faster than feet. Drake would hear. I stopped at a bridge over the canal, leaned on the railing, and bought a paper cone of roasted nuts from a street vendor. I ate slowly. I looked relaxed. I had 17 chains hidden in the quiver, 6 smoke bombs, 8 glue potions, 3 frost vials, black water, monster teeth, delay sword fragments, Cole's donated stone chips, Logan's experimental exploding arrows. And a small lightning rod I had stolen from the workshop roof, with permission I had not requested. I was relaxed. The first attack came from below. A blade pierced up through the bridge boards toward my foot. I shifted an inch and dropped a roasted nut into the hole. Then I fired it downward. The nut became a tiny golden bullet. Someone under the bridge screamed. 3 figures dropped from rooftops. 2 more came from the crowd. 6th rose from the canal wearing a breathing mask and holding a curved knife. No, Drake. Bait for bait. Fine. I fired smoke bombs into the air, not to hide myself, but to hide the civilians. The bridge vanished in gray clouds. People screamed and ran. I fired glowing mushroom spores through the smoke, making the attackers cough and revealing their outlines in blue sparks. The rooftop fighters threw hooks. I fired chains to meet them. Chain tangled hook, hook tangled chain, and suddenly they were connected to me. They smiled like they had caught me. I smiled because they had caught the quiver. I fired the chains backward into the bridge pillars. The attackers were yanked off the roof and slammed into the side of the bridge hard enough to make the canal jump. The canal fighter lunged through the mist. I fired a frost vial into the water at his feet. The surface froze around his legs. Then I fired a glue potion onto the ice. He became a statue with regrets. The 2 crowd attackers were smarter. They ignored me and moved toward civilians. There it was. Evil people always reveal the fastest path to losing. I fired monster teeth into the stones around them, not hitting flesh, just making a circle of spikes that penned them in. One tried to jump out. I fired the pillow. He sat down very suddenly. The other threw a dagger at a child. I reached with the quiver's pole field. The dagger curved in midair, vanished into my quiver, and fired back handle first into his jaw. He dropped. Guards arrived moments later. Again, all attackers alive. Again, all tied or glued or frozen. Again, very useful evidence. But Drake had watched. I felt it before I saw him. Not fear. Attention. A pressure at the edge of the smoke. He stood on the far roof in a dark coat, one hand resting on the hilt of a new sword. His smile was gone. Good, smiles are masks. I wanted to see the face underneath. He raised 2 fingers. The bridge exploded. Not from the center. From the supports. He had planted charges ahead of time. The whole bridge tilted, civilians sliding, boards cracking, canal water roaring below. My footing vanished. For one breath, there was no fight. Only falling. Then the quiver opened. I fired chains in every direction. One wrapped around a rooftop chimney. One caught a lamppost. One hooked the broken bridge railing. I fired sap across the collapsing boards, gluing loose planks together long enough for people to crawl. A child slid past me. I fired a pillow into the canal below him. Then I fired another, then another. Compressed pillows hit the water and expanded weirdly, forming floating cushions. The child landed on them and bounced, crying but alive. A man fell toward the broken edge. I fired a chain around his waist and yanked him back so hard he rolled into a fruit stall. A fruit stall is cheaper than a funeral. Drake watched me save people instead of chase him. That was his plan. Make me choose. So I chose both. I fired the lightning rod. Not at Drake. At the wet roof behind him. Then I fired a black water stream across the roof tiles, connecting the rod to the metal gutters. The night storm above us had been grumbling for 10 minutes. I had noticed because noticing things was what kept me alive. The lightning came down like heaven had been waiting for permission. It struck the rod, raced through the water, and exploded across the roof behind Drake. He dodged forward, exactly where I wanted him. I fired a chain through the smoke. It wrapped around his ankle. For the first time, I caught him. Then he cut the chain with his new sword, and the cut screamed. The chain did not fall. It withered. Rust spread along it, eating the metal into red dust before it touched the ground. Decay blade. Drake had upgraded. He vanished into the storm while I held the bridge together with the quiver and raw panic. By the time the guards secured the civilians, Drake was gone. But I had learned his new weapon. And I had learned he was willing to destroy a bridge full of people just to slow me down. That meant the next fight could not happen in the city. I needed a place where he could attack me without hurting anyone else. I needed him angry enough to stop planning. So I stole from him. Not money. Not weapons. His pride. Drake's hidden supply cache was under the old bathhouse, behind the pit arena we had ruined. The guards had searched it already, but guards look for contraband. I look for what a man thinks is too clever to hide with everything else. Behind a cracked monster cage, I found a wall that sounded hollow. Behind that wall, I found shelves full of monster parts, cursed scrolls, explosive beads, and bones carved with dungeon marks. Drake had been collecting boss remains. That was why he wanted my quiver. Not to sell it. To fire the things he had gathered but could not use. I almost respected the idea. Then I remembered the collars. I fed the quiver everything. Monster teeth sharper than daggers. Cursed scrolls that whispered when touched. Explosive beads pulsing red. A bundle of lightning rods thin as arrows. Chains etched with binding marks. A boss rib as long as my arm. A skull fragment that made my fingers go numb. The quiver took all of it. For the first time, it felt full. Not full like no more space. Full like a storm cloud ready to break. Logan nearly fainted when I showed him. He said cursed scrolls, explosives, and boss bones should never be stored in the same extra-dimensional relic. I asked why. He said because nobody knew what would happen. I told him that was the best kind of answer. He made me a new bow anyway. Sixth bow was ugly, thick, reinforced with black metal and silver thread. It looked less like a bow and more like a bridge that had learned violence. Logan said it could handle 3 full-power shots before exploding. I asked if the explosion would be forward or backward. He said probably. Perfect. Iris gave me permission to enter the abandoned quarry outside the city, where old dungeon stone made it hard for civilians to wander in. She did not call it permission. She called it supervised bait. Cole insisted on coming. I told him Drake was after me. He said that was why he was coming. Apparently, if anyone was going to beat me into the dirt, he had emotional ownership of the privilege. I did not argue. The quarry was a huge bowl of black stone under a cloudy sky. Broken pillars stuck out of the ground like giant teeth. Old mining rails twisted around pits filled with glowing dust. It was isolated, unstable, and full of things I could store. Again, paradise. We waited until sunset. Drake arrived with 12 fighters and a monster. Not a tamed beast this time. A fused thing. 3 bodies stitched together by curse marks, walking on too many legs, with a human-shaped mask nailed to its face. The system panel called it a grief chimera. I hated Drake a little more for every second I looked at it. He stood behind the creature, decay blade in hand, and told me I had taken what belonged to him. I said he should be more careful leaving evil junk in evil basements. He ordered the attack. Fighters spread out smart enough not to bunch together. 2 carried tower shields, but not the full armor kind, just mobile cover. 3 had crossbows, the rest moved with blades and hooks. The chimera crawled forward, mask twitching. Cole spun his spear beside me. He asked for the plan. I said the plan was to make them think they had won. I fired the first shot into the sky. A curse scroll arrow. It unfurled above the quarry, black paper burning with blue letters, and burst into a ring of whispering symbols. Drake's fighters flinched, expecting death. Nothing happened. At least nothing obvious. Then I fired stones at the shield carriers. They raised their shields and blocked easily. Good. The curse had marked every object that blocked my shots. I fired chains at the crossbowmen. They dodged. Good. Now the chains knew their movement. I fired explosive beads at the ground, not near anyone, just enough to kick dust into the air. Drake laughed and said I was wasting my stolen prizes. I let him think that for 3 more seconds. Then I pulled. Marked shields ripped sideways as if grabbed by invisible hands, slamming into the crossbowmen. The dodge chains curved back, not following bodies, but following the pattern of their escape steps. They wrapped ankles and wrists. The dust from the explosions stuck to everyone it touched, glowing faintly. Cole moved through the chaos like a silver line. He knocked out 3 fighters without killing them. I fired glue sap to pin another 2. A hook fighter jumped toward my back, so I fired a monster tooth over my shoulder without turning. It cut his belt, his pants dropped, and he fell on his face. Cole yelled that I could have just hit him. I told him humiliation is cheaper than healing. Then the chimera screamed. The sound hit the quarry like a hammer. My knees buckled. Cole staggered. The pinned fighters started bleeding from their ears. The chimera was hurting everyone, including Drake's own men. Drake did not care. The creature charged. I fired a boss rib. The rib shot forward like a white spear and slammed into the chimera's shoulder. It should have pierced. Instead, the creature absorbed it. Bones shifted under its skin. The rib became part of it. That was bad. The chimera could eat monster materials. I fired black water. It burned the surface but did not slow it. I fired explosive beads. The blasts tore chunks away, but new flesh crawled over the wounds. Cole stabbed one of its legs. The spear sank in and got stuck. The chimera lifted him. I fired a chain around Cole's waist and yanked. He came free, but his spear stayed lodged in the monster. The chimera turned toward him. Drake smiled. He thought he had found my weakness again. Protecting people. He still did not understand. A weakness is only a weakness if you refuse to weaponize it. I fired a chain around Cole again. He shouted that he was not ammunition. I said not yet. Then I fired him. The quiver could not store a person. I was not trying to. The chain shot pulled him with arrow force, launching him in a straight line across the quarry. He grabbed his stuck spear as he passed the chimera, and I fired a gust potion behind him. The boost ripped the spear free and spun him around like a living drill. Cole understood halfway through the flight. He angled the spear and carved a glowing line across the chimera's mask. The mask cracked. The scream stopped. I fired 3 lightning rods into the cracks. Drake's eyes widened. The storm above the quarry answered. Lightning dropped again, but this time not 1 bolt, 3. Each rod pulled a different strike into the chimera's face. The mask exploded. The creature collapsed, twitching, smoke rising from its stitched body. But it still was not dead. The curse marks tried to pull it back together. So I fired the pillow. No, not to kill it. To cover the exposed core. The pillow hit the core, expanded, and stuck because I had soaked it in glue sap earlier. Then I fired an explosive bead into the pillow. The pillow became a soft bomb. The chimera vanished in a muffled explosion that sounded like someone angrily punching a bed. Even Drake looked offended. That was when Iris and the guards moved in from the cliffs. She had waited, as planned, until Drake's men attacked first and the chimera was exposed. Every surviving fighter had been marked, tied, glued, or knocked senseless. The guards swept down with capture chains. Drake realized he had been baited into presenting his crimes in a quarry full of witnesses. He ran at me. No more speeches. Just decay, blade, and murder. His first cut erased a stone pillar behind me. His second turned one of my chains to dust before it could wrap him. His third sliced through a volley of monster teeth, rotting them midair. I backed away, firing constantly. Rocks decayed. Knives decayed. Chains decayed. Even black water broke apart into harmless steam when his sword passed through it. The decay blade did not block. It ended things. So I needed to give it something it could not finish fast enough. I fired everything small. Stone dust, flour, spores, glass powder, metal filings from Logan's workshop, ash from the burned invitation, sand from the arena, powdered bone all at once, not as separate shots. As a storm, Drake swung his sword and the front layer decayed, but there was too much. He cut and cut, rotting clouds of material, but the dust surrounded him, stuck to his coat, filled his breath, coated his blade. He coughed. The decay blade flickered. I fired a frost vial at the sword itself. It froze the dust on the blade, creating a shell. He broke it, but that took one beat. One beat was enough. I fired the delay sword fragment. The first slash missed. Drake smirked. The afterimage cut the strap on his scabbard. It fell under his foot. He shifted without thinking. I fired glue sap onto the scabbard. His boot stuck. He cut downward to free himself. Exactly as expected. The decay blade touched the glue, the scabbard, the ground all at once. Decay spread into the quarry stone beneath him, turning it brittle. I fired a heavy boss skull fragment into the weakened ground. The stone collapsed. Drake dropped waist deep into the pit. He tried to lift the blade. Cole's spear hit his wrist from the side. I fired a chain around the sword hilt, not to hold it, but to pull it away at the exact moment his grip loosened. The decay blade flew toward me. For one insane second, I considered storing it. The quiver trembled like it wanted to swallow a disaster. I said no. Clever does not mean greedy. I fired a binding chain instead, wrapping the blade in midair and slamming it point first into a block of dungeon stone Logan had prepared. The stone cracked, decayed, and hardened again under Iris's sealing charm. The blade was trapped. Drake was dragged out of the pit by guards, furious, humiliated, and very alive for his future trial in a place with thicker walls. He looked at me with pure hatred. I looked back and raised one hand. Then I fired a roasted nut into his forehead. Not hard enough to hurt badly. Just enough for justice to have flavor. The guards took him away again. This time, Iris personally sealed his cell. For 2 weeks, the city called me a hero. For 2 weeks, I hated every second of it. Not because praise felt bad. Praise is dangerous because it makes people think they know you. They called me the Quiver Champion, the Alley Phantom, the Pillow Demon, which was rude but fair. They told the bridge story, the pit story, the quarry story. Every version got louder, cleaner, and less useful. Nobody talked about the part that mattered. The Quiver had refused the decay blade. Or maybe I had refused it. Either way, I felt a line inside me. There were things I could store and fire. There were things I should not. That thought bothered me more than Drake ever had. Power does not become safe because you are the one holding it. So I trained harder. Iris taught me how to move without wasting motion. Cole taught me how spear fighters read shoulders. Logan built bow number 7, then bow number 8, then a reinforced wrist frame after bow number 8 exploded and wrote its opinion in the ceiling. The quiver kept evolving. I no longer needed to physically draw every shot. Sometimes a thought was enough. Sometimes a stored object floated behind my shoulder for half a second before launching. Sometimes, if I fired several items together, the quiver combined their traits. A chain plus black water became a burning whip. A monster tooth plus lightning rod became a storm fang. Glue sap plus frost vial became crystal resin that trapped targets inside clear ice. A pillow plus explosive bead became something Logan begged me never to test indoors again. I tested it outdoors. The crater looked very comfortable. Then the deep gate opened. It appeared above the northern wall at dawn, a red-black spiral that made every bell in the city ring by itself. This was no academy trial, no controlled dungeon, no forest trick. A real deep gate meant a full raid or a full disaster. Hunters gathered by rank, instructors prepared barriers, the city guards cleared nearby streets. Iris was appointed raid captain because nobody else had the nerve to argue with her face. She looked at me and said I was not required to enter. That was how I knew things were bad. Cole stood beside me with his spear repaired and upgraded. Logan handed me bow number 9, which was wrapped in metal bands and prayer charms from 3 different workshops. He said it might survive. I asked if he meant the bow or me. He said yes. The deep gate pulled 40 hunters into a ruined cathedral made of black bone. The air inside tasted like iron. The ceiling was too high to see. Candles burned with green fire along walls covered in claw marks. The floor was not stone. It was armor, weapons, and bones crushed flat into a path. I immediately started collecting. Cole saw me pick up a cracked helmet and sighed. I told him everything is an arrow if you believe irresponsibly enough. The first wave came from the pews. Bone soldiers stood up by the hundreds, each one holding a weapon from some dead raid. Swords, axes, spears, bows, hooks, broken shields. Their skulls burned with tiny green flames. The raid line formed. Iris ordered shields forward, blades ready, ranged fire in waves. A normal battle began. I ruined it beautifully. I fired a cracked helmet into the first bone soldier. It exploded into metal fragments, breaking 3 skulls behind it. I fired chains through rib cages and pulled skeletons together so Cole could shatter 6 with 1 spinning sweep. I fired holy candle wax from the walls. It struck the bone soldiers and burned green fire white, making them crumble. Then I realized the cathedral weapons were not fixed to their owners. They were loot with legs. I fired my quiver's pull field. Every broken dagger, rusted arrowhead, loose hook, and cracked spear tip from the front row ripped free and flew into my quiver. Skeletons looked down at their empty hands, deeply betrayed by physics. Then I fired their own weapons back. The front wave vanished under a storm of stolen history. Hunters stared. Iris did not. She pointed forward and ordered everyone to move. That was why she was captain. The cathedral shifted as we advanced. Walls opened, side halls breathed. Choir voices echoed from nowhere, singing notes that made weaker hunters stumble. At each chamber, the monsters changed. Bone archers on balconies. I fired lightning rods into the railings and let the green candles conduct the charge. Armor beasts crawling on 4 legs. I fired black water into the joints and glue frost over the plates, trapping them like statues. Flying skulls that exploded when struck. I fired pillows. They detonated inside soft cloth and dropped like angry fruit. Every chamber gave me more ammunition. Every enemy became a future mistake for someone else. By the time we reached the central nave, the quiver list in my mind was enormous. Rust swords, bone arrows, candle wax, skull fire, armor plates, broken shields, cathedral dust, cursed choir bells. A cracked saint statue's finger. I had no idea what that last one did, but it looked judgmental, so I stored it. Then the boss descended. It was a knight made of black bone, 3 times taller than a man, with antlers of iron and a cloak of torn banners. Its sword was a slab of moonlit darkness. The system panel called it the Grave Paladin. The raid team attacked with everything. It blocked everything. Iris's blade arts carved silver lines across its armor, but the wounds closed. Cole stabbed through its knee, but the spear bounced. Mages blasted fire, wind, and light. The paladin walked through it all and swung once. 10 hunters flew backward. The raid formation broke. The cathedral choir grew louder. I fired a boss rib from Drake's cache. The paladin caught it in one hand. Then it crushed the rib into powder. That was rude. I fired explosive beads. It swung its cloak and the blasts vanished inside the torn banners. I fired chains. The sword cut them. I fired skull fire. The paladin absorbed it into its antlers. This thing was not just strong. It was built to deny attacks. So I stopped attacking. I started feeding it lies. I fired a curse scroll at the floor in front of it. The scroll burst into a circle of black letters. The paladin stepped around it. Good, it avoided curses. I fired candle wax at its shoulder. It blocked with the cloak. Good, the cloak protected weak points. I fired a stone at the antlers. It tilted its head slightly. Good, the antlers mattered. I fired the cracked statue finger at its face. The paladin froze for half a second. Interesting. The statue was sacred to whatever old power this cathedral had ruined. The finger carried judgment. The paladin hated it. I fired the rest of the statue fragments I had collected from side halls. Fingers, stone curls, broken eye pieces, one entire nose. Sacred rubble hammered the paladin, and for the first time, it backed up. Cole shouted that only I could disrespect a boss with a holy nose. I told him to aim for the knees. He did. Iris saw the pattern too. She ordered the raid to gather broken statue pieces and toss them to me. Hunters who had laughed at my trash tactics earlier were now desperately feeding me holy garbage. Beautiful character development. The quiver drank everything. I drew bow number 9. It groaned. I fired a volley of sacred stone, candle wax chains and skull fire twisted together. The shots became white-burning chains that wrapped around the paladin's antlers. It pulled back. The antlers cracked. The choir screamed. The paladin raised its sword for a killing strike aimed at the wounded hunters. I had one shot left before Logan's bow failed. So I made it stupid. I loaded a pillow, a curse scroll, sacred stone dust, and an explosive bead. Logan, somewhere outside the gate, probably felt a chill and did not know why. The arrow formed as a glowing white cushion covered in black letters. I fired. The paladin cut it. The pillow split. Soft feathers burst across its face, each feather carrying sacred dust and curse script. The explosive bead detonated inside the cloud. The paladin's head vanished in a holy pillow bomb. Bow number 9 exploded. My arms went numb. The boss staggered. Iris jumped, blade glowing. Cole launched himself off a broken pillar. The whole raid attacked the exposed core in its chest. I reached for the quiver, but there was no bow left. Again. For one heartbeat, I was just a guy with an empty hand. Then the quiver opened behind me. Not physically at first. The air split into a dark oval lined with silver light, then another, then 5 more. Tiny gates bloomed behind my shoulders like black feathers. Inside each one, I saw my stored weapons floating in impossible space. Rocks, knives, chains, potions, monster teeth, scrolls, lightning rods, boss bones, pillows, everything. The quiver was no longer asking for a bow. It was becoming one. I lifted my hand. Every gate aimed. I fired. The cathedral disappeared behind a storm of everything I had ever survived. Chains wrapped the grave paladin's arms. Lightning rods pierced its antlers and called down white bolts from the cathedral ceiling. Monster teeth drilled through armor cracks. Black water burned the cloak. Sacred stone dust ate the curse holding its bones together. Explosive beads bloomed across its chest. Pillow shots cushioned the blasts inward, forcing every explosion into the core instead of away from it. The grave paladin tried to stand. Cole drove his spear into one knee. Iris cut through the other. I fired the boss skull fragment from Drake's cache into the exposed core. It struck like a moon falling. The paladin shattered. The cathedral roof split open, and red light poured in. The deep gate cleared. When we returned, the northern wall was still standing. The city was still alive, and every hunter who had survived looked at me like they had watched a joke turn into a natural disaster. I collapsed immediately. Very heroic. When I woke up, I was in the academy infirmary, with bandages on both arms and the quiver hanging calmly beside my bed like it had not just opened a private apocalypse behind me. Cole was asleep in a chair with his spear across his knees. Iris stood by the window. Logan was under the bed fixing something, which raised questions I did not want answered. I tried to sit up. Every bone in my body voted no. Iris told me the grave paladin's core had been recovered. The city wanted to award me an official title. The academy wanted to study my quiver. The raid guilds wanted to recruit me. Logan wanted to know if the pillow bomb could be improved. I said no to the study, no to the title for now, no to the guilds, and maybe to the pillow bomb. Cole opened one eye and said I was getting arrogant. I told him I had been arrogant since the first rock. He went back to sleep. For a while, things were almost peaceful. Peaceful means nobody attacked me before breakfast. That lasted 4 days. On the 5th day, the academy received word that a prison transport had been ambushed on the road to the sealed mountain jail. Drake was missing again. This time, the guards found no dead bodies. Only empty chains, broken wheels, and a message carved into the road with a decay mark. The message was for me. It said the next gate would choose the battlefield. That worried me. Not because Drake was free. Because he had used the word gate. Drake was not a dungeon boss. He was not a system administrator. He was not some cosmic judge. He was a dangerous man with too much ambition and no respect for consequences. But ambition can open doors it cannot close. I went back to the quarry where we had fought him. The decay blade was still sealed in dungeon stone under guard. Iris came with me. Cole came too. Logan came because the words sealed dangerous weapon made him breathe faster. The stone block was intact. The blade was still trapped, but something had grown around it. Tiny black roots spread from the impact point, crawling through the stone like cracks made of ink. They pulsed when I stepped closer. The quiver pulsed back. For the first time since I awakened, I felt it want something with hunger that was not mine. I stepped away. The pulse stopped. Iris noticed. She asked what happened. I said the quiver and the blade recognized each other. Logan stopped smiling. Cole tightened his grip on his spear. That night I could not sleep. Every item in the quiver felt restless. Chains rattled in impossible space. Monster teeth clicked, scrolls whispered. Even the pillows felt judgmental, which was new. At midnight, a red gate opened above the city cemetery. Not huge like the deep gate. Small, quiet, personal. Only one panel appeared in the sky. Challenge gate. One entrant. Suggested weapon, bow. The entire academy turned to look at me. I hated how dramatic my life had become. Iris told me I did not have to go. Cole said that meant I definitely would. Logan handed me bow number 10. It was not a bow in the normal sense. It was a metal frame that attached to my forearm, with a string of compressed light and stabilizers that hummed dangerously. He said it should survive the quiver's gate form. I asked what the side effects were. He said honesty would hurt morale. I took it. Before entering, I emptied my pockets into the quiver. Rocks, nails, a spoon, a candle, 3 roasted nuts, 1 cracked academy medal I had not worn since the tournament. Cole gave me a spearhead chipped from his weapon. Iris gave me a thin silver charm from her sword hilt. Logan gave me a tiny metal cube and told me not to fire it unless reality was already being rude. I asked what it did. He said it unfolded. That was enough. I stepped into the cemetery gate alone. The world turned red. I landed on a road made of broken weapons under a sky full of hanging chains. Grave markers stretched forever on both sides, each one carved with the name of a weapon instead of a person. Sword, axe, bow, spear, shield. Dagger, staff, hammer, all the choices people thought defined them. At the end of the road stood Drake. But not the Drake I knew. His right arm was wrapped in black roots. His eyes glowed with decay light. A broken piece of the sealed blade had fused into his palm, forming a short sword grown from his bones. He had not stolen the decay blade. He had let it infect him. That was worse. He smiled and said he finally understood my quiver. Every weapon wanted to be used. Every relic wanted a hand. I had been wasting mine by pretending I controlled it. I told him he was talking a lot for a man with a sword disease. He attacked. The road split under his first slash. Decay spread through the broken weapons at my feet, turning them into ash. I fired chains from the quiver gate. He cut them, and the decay raced back toward the portals. I shut those gates instantly, so decay could infect the connection. Bad. I fired from new angles, rocks from above, knives from below, lightning rods from the left, glue frost from the right. Drake moved through it all with frightening calm, cutting only what mattered, letting harmless shots pass, decaying the dangerous ones before they touched him. He had learned, too. The challenge gate amplified him. Every broken weapon on the road fed the decay in his arm. The more he destroyed, the stronger he became. So I stopped giving him weapons. I fired flour. He cut through it. Bad choice. Flour decayed into black dust and hung in the air around him. I fired frost into the dust. It froze into tiny dark crystals. He cut those too, but cutting them made smaller crystals. Then I fired lightning rods into the cloud. Electricity jumped from crystal to crystal, surrounding him in a crackling cage. Drake broke through, but his arm smoked. Good. The decay hated being forced to split itself. I ran down the road, not away, sideways between graves. Drake followed, slashing through markers. Every time he cut a weapon name, a ghostly version of that weapon rose and fused into his arm. Sword, axe, spear, bow. His blade grew longer, stranger, hungrier. I realized the trick too late. The gate was not choosing the battlefield for him. He had chosen a battlefield full of food. So I needed to change the menu. I fired Iris's silver charm into the nearest grave marker. The charm stuck to the word shield and flashed. The ghostly shield rose, but instead of flying to Drake, it formed in front of me. I touched it. The quiver drank the shape. Not the object. The idea. Shield. A new category opened in my mind. Not arrows. Not items. Forms. I fired the shield form from a gate behind my shoulder. a translucent shield slammed into Drake's slash, not stopping it completely, but slowing it long enough for me to dodge. I understood. The quiver had stored every object I fed it. Now it was learning what those objects meant. A chain meant bind. A knife meant pierce. A pillow meant absorb. A lightning rod meant call. A bow meant release. And an arrow meant direction. I laughed so hard Drake hesitated. Then I went shopping in the cemetery. I fired silver charm sparks into grave after grave. Shield, hook, bell, net, anchor, mirror, needle. Each weapon name rose as a ghost form, and the quiver swallowed the concept before Drake could decay it. Drake chased me, furious now. The calm was gone. His blade tore through graves, but every broken marker gave me something too. He thought destruction belonged to him. I made it inventory. He unleashed a wave of decay across the whole road. I fired mirror form. A dozen ghostly mirrors opened behind me, catching pieces of the wave and reflecting them sideways into empty graves. He snarled and lunged through the mirrors. I fired anchor form at his shadow. A black hook slammed into the ground, pinning his movement for half a second. I fired needle form with monster tooth. A thin white fang pierced the root armor around his wrist. I fired bell form with cursed choir metal. The sound rang once, and the decay roots shook like they had heard their own funeral. Drake ripped free, bleeding black smoke. He said I was still weak because I needed tricks. I told him tricks are what weak people call thinking when it beats them. He screamed and raised his infected arm. Every grave in the cemetery cracked at once. Weapon ghosts rose by the thousands and flew toward him. If they reached him, his blade would become an army. I had one chance. Logan's metal cube pulsed in the quiver. Reality was definitely being rude. I fired it. The cube shot into the air above the road and unfolded. Not into a bomb. Into a frame. Then another frame. And 100 little frames connected by silver lines, forming a massive circular rail behind me. Logan had built a launcher for the quiver's gate form. A bow big enough for the sky. The quiver understood immediately. All the portals behind me snapped into the rail, aligning, rotating, aiming. Every stored object, form, and memory moved into position. My body felt like it was standing in front of a hurricane with a smile. Drake's weapon ghosts rushed toward him. I pulled the light string on my forearm. The sky bow drew itself. I loaded everything that meant stop. Chains, nets, anchors, glue frost, shield forms, pillows. Yes, pillows. The first volley fired before the ghosts reached Drake. A wall of binding shots crossed the cemetery, wrapping the weapon spirits midair, slowing them, compressing them into a spinning mass. Drake tried to decay the bindings, but there were too many, layered with shield meaning and pillow absorption. Then I loaded everything that meant pierce. Knives, needles, monster teeth, spearhead from coal, boss bone shards, sacred statue dust. The second volley drilled through the trapped spirit mass and pinned it to the road in front of Drake. He stumbled. For the first time, he looked afraid. Then I loaded everything that meant return. Delay sword fragments. Mirror form. The cracked academy medal. Every insult. Every laugh. Every moment someone looked at me and saw nothing but a quiver with no bow. The third shot was not big. It was small, bright, and quiet. It flew straight into Drake's infected arm. For a second, nothing happened. Then every weapon ghost he had stolen returned to its grave. The decay blade shrank. The roots pulled back. His sword bone cracked. Drake screamed as the relic inside him lost its feast. He lunged one last time, desperate, human again in the worst way. I did not kill him. I fired a chain, a pillow, glue frost, and shield formed together. The shot became a white binding cocoon that wrapped him from shoulders to ankles, absorbed his impact, froze his limbs, and pinned him to the road without breaking a bone. He fell at my feet, alive, trapped, and finally out of speeches. The challenge gate trembled. A reward panel appeared above the road. But before I could read it, the quiver opened on its own. Every portal behind me turned toward the far end of the cemetery. A new grave had appeared there. It was taller than the others, black stone, no weapon name carved into it. Just a symbol shaped like an open eye. The quiver pulsed once. The grave pulsed back. Then the gate collapsed. I returned to the city cemetery at dawn, carrying Drake wrapped in frozen bindings like the world's worst gift. Iris was waiting at the gate edge with guards, Cole, and Logan. Nobody spoke for a moment. Then Logan looked at Drake, looked at me, and asked if the cube worked. I said it unfolded. He pumped his fist like that explained everything. The guards took Drake away under Iris's personal seal. This time, he was not going to a normal cell. He was going somewhere under the academy, somewhere full of stone, charms, and people who did not sleep during guard duty. Cole asked if I had one. I looked at the quiver. It was quiet again, but not empty quiet. Listening quiet. I said I had won this fight. Nobody missed the difference. The city celebrated anyway. They repaired the bridge, they emptied Drake's remaining hideouts, they freed the last caged monsters and sent them through controlled gates. The academy promoted me beyond students who had once shoved me in hallways. Hunters who had ignored me now stepped aside when I walked past. The same weapon altar, where everyone laughed at me, was polished for a ceremony. I stood before it with the infinite quiver on my back and no bow in my hands. Iris announced my new rank. Cole stood in the front row, pretending not to be proud. Logan had already started sketching bow number 11 on the back of an official program, which made Iris look like she might commit a small crime. People cheered. This time I let myself enjoy it. Not because I needed their approval. Because I had earned the right to stand there and remember every laugh. The altar pulsed under my feet. A panel of light appeared, brighter than before. Infinite Quiver evolved. Gate Arsenal unlocked. Bow no longer required. Stored forms retained. Concept fusion unstable. I read that last line twice. Unstable is one of those words that sounds like a warning to normal people and an invitation to Logan. I closed the panel before he could see it. Too late. He saw it. His eyes sparkled. Iris told him no. He asked no to which part. She said all of them. I should have walked straight to the field after that. That was the responsible choice. Test the new power, learn the limits, make sure the unstable concept fusion did not accidentally turn a pillow into a falling moon. But peace has always treated me like a suspicious stranger. Before I even reached the outer stairs, a siren screamed from the workshop wing. Not the normal alarm, not the practice alarm, not the one Logan set off every time he confused safety with cowardice. This one had a low, ugly vibration that made the academy windows tremble. The relic vault. I looked at Iris. Iris looked at me. Cole looked at both of us and said he hated how often my face meant trouble. Then the floor shook, and somewhere below us, Logan shouted that nobody was allowed to steal anything until he finished labeling it. That was enough for me. I ran. The academy workshop wing was already filling with smoke when I reached it. Students poured out of stairwells. Instructors formed lines. A few hunters reached for weapons, then hesitated when the smoke twisted into thin black ribbons instead of rising like normal fire. That was not smoke. That was shadow powder. Drake had used it once in an alley to hide 3 men behind a wall that was not there. I had collected a handful of it afterward because I was emotionally attached to useful garbage. The powder did not burn the lungs, it burned attention. You looked at it and your eyes slid away from whatever mattered. So when everyone stared at the smoke pouring from the workshop, I looked at the floor instead. Boot prints. Not academy boots, too narrow, too soft, raider boots made for quiet stone. Someone had broken into the relic vault during my promotion ceremony, which meant they had either terrible timing or perfect timing. I lifted my hand and opened 3 small gates behind my shoulder. No bow, no string, just thought and angle. A pinch of chalk dust fired from one gate. A pebble from another. A torn strip of old banner cloth from the third. It did not attack anyone. They spread across the hallway in 3 directions, brushing through the smoke, bouncing off walls, dragging the air with them. The shadow powder curled around invisible shapes. 4 people were sneaking toward the east stairwell. One was carrying a sealed case. I smiled. The case was too heavy for his posture, and he was leaning slightly left. That meant the stolen object was not just valuable, it was angry. Probably Drake's decay blade fragment. Because apparently nobody in this city had learned that touching cursed trophies was how you earned dramatic scars and emergency funerals. The sneaking raiders saw me see them. One threw a dagger. I tilted my head. A gate opened beside my ear and swallowed it. Another gate opened behind his knee and fired the same dagger flat first into the back of his leg. He folded like a chair. The hallway went silent for half a second. Then the other three attacked. Good. I liked when villains made the explanation easy. One raider swung a hooked chain toward my neck. I let the hook come close enough to touch my collar, then opened a gate between the links and fired glue sap into the chain's own coil. The weapon stuck to itself mid-swing and became a metal noodle. I yanked it, and the raider came flying toward me with the exact surprised expression of someone who had not expected his weapon to develop loyalty issues. I stepped aside. Cole arrived like a lightning strike and kicked him into a wall. Another raider aimed a hand crossbow at my chest. I fired a spoon into the trigger. Not the bolt, the trigger. The spoon wedged perfectly into the mechanism, the crossbow snapped backward, and the bolt shot straight up into a chandelier. The chandelier fell. I caught it with 3 chain gates before it hit the students behind us, spun it once, and launched the entire chandelier sideways like a sparkling net. It wrapped around the crossbow raider and pinned him to the floor in a pile of crystals. Cole stared at the chandelier. I told him I was adding interior design to my fighting style. The last raider still had the case. He sprinted for the stairwell, and the black smoke bent around him like a cloak. Iris appeared at the top of the stairs. She did not run, she did not shout. She simply drew one thin line through the air with her sword. The smoke split in half. The raider slid to a stop, so hard his boots screamed. For a moment, everyone froze. Then the case in his arms clicked. That was the wrong sound. The seal was opening from the inside. A crack of gray light split across the case lid, and the hallway temperature dropped. Stone under the raider's feet aged in an instant. Fresh marble became dusty ruin. The wall behind him peeled like dry bark. The decay blade fragment was awake. The raider tried to drop the case. It stuck to his hands. He screamed. I did not fire at him. I fired around him. 4 gates opened in a square. Chains shot out, wrapped his wrists, ankles, and waist, then yanked him backward. He flew away from the open case right as the lid burst. A sliver of black metal rose from inside. It was only part of the blade Drake had used, but it moved like a living fang. The fragment spun toward the nearest weapon rack. Every sword on the rack rusted at once. Every spear cracked. Every arrow crumbled. Then the fragment turned toward me. Of course it did. Cursed things have terrible taste. I opened a gate and fired a rock. The rock became dust before it touched the fragment. I fired 10 nails. Dust, a knife, rust, a boss bone chip. The chip survived half a second longer, then flaked apart like old bread. The fragment floated closer. Behind me, Logan crawled out from under a collapsed table with soot in his hair and a wrench between his teeth. He saw the fragment and immediately said that was not ideal. I told him his vocabulary was becoming too calm. The fragment lunged. I dropped flat. It passed over me and carved a gray line through the air. The line stayed there, hanging like a wound in space. Cole stabbed at it from the side. Iris shouted his name. Too late. His spearhead touched the gray line and aged 20 years in a blink. The metal dulled, the edge chipped, the shaft cracked near his grip. Cole's eyes widened, not with fear but with offense. He had just repaired that spear. Now he wanted personal revenge on a floating shard of evil metal. The fragment spun back toward him. I fired a pillow. The pillow expanded in midair, hit the fragment, and instantly became the saddest pile of ancient feathers ever seen. But it slowed the fragment by 1 heartbeat. That was all Iris needed. She placed her silver sword between Cole and the shard, not striking it directly, just guiding it away with the flat of her blade. Her sword smoked, her hand shook. She still looked bored enough to terrify Weather. I grabbed Logan by the back of his shirt and dragged him behind a pillar. He started explaining that decay was not simply corrosion, it was forced conclusion, which meant it pushed objects toward their final ruined state. I asked what its final ruined state was. Logan stopped talking. Then he looked at me with the exact expression he wore before blowing up the wall. He said everything has a final state. I said not helpful. He said the fragment's final state was probably sealed again. That was helpful. I looked at the broken case. The original seal plates were scattered across the floor. Silver strips, charms, stone clamps. A few were already aging into dust, but some were intact. I opened gates under every intact seal piece. The quiver swallowed them. New weight appeared behind my ribs, like the idea of a lock had been added to my spine. The fragment felt it. It turned from Iris and rushed straight at me. I ran toward it. Cole shouted that I was choosing the worst possible direction. He was not wrong. But when something wants to destroy you, the funniest place to stand is exactly where it thinks victory is waiting. I fired a broken seal plate past the fragment, not at it. Then another. Then another. The plates flew around the hallway and stuck into the walls, floor, and ceiling, forming a crooked circle. The fragment chased me through the center of it. It was faster than a sword swing, faster than Drake's hand, faster than my first thought. So I used my second thought. I tripped. On purpose. Mostly. The fragment shot over my back. I opened a gate above it and fired Cole's chipped spearhead. The spearhead struck the fragment from above, not to damage it, but to change its direction by the smallest amount. It tilted. That tiny tilt pushed it into the circle of seal plates. I fired the Academy medal next. The cracked metal spun into the middle of the circle, carrying a little of the altar's blessing and a lot of my personal annoyance. The seal plates lit up. The fragment slammed into an invisible wall. The hallway filled with a sound like someone trying to tear a bell in half. I fired chains through the glowing circle, wrapping the fragment from 6 directions. The chains began to age the instant they touched the gray light, so I kept firing more, rusted chains on top of fresh chains. Fresh chains on top of cursed cloth on top of holy wax. I buried the fragment under every binding material I had ever collected. The pile shook. Logan shouted that the circle would not hold unless I gave it a container. I looked around. The stolen case was ruined. The weapon racks were dust. The floor was cracking. Then I saw the chandelier raider still pinned under crystals. The chandelier frame was silver-plated. Decorative, expensive, completely ridiculous. Perfect. I opened 20 gates and ripped the chandelier apart piece by piece. Silver hoops, crystal chains, candle arms, the little useless angels at the top. Every piece shot into the seal circle and formed a cage around the fragment. The fragment thrashed once. Twice. Then the silver cage collapsed inward and snapped shut. Quiet returned. The raiders groaned from the floor. Students stared. Iris looked at the sealed chandelier cage, then at me. I said no one could accuse me of not helping with renovations. For once, Cole laughed first. The guards arrived moments later, and the raiders tried to claim they had been possessed. That might have worked if one of them had not still been holding a written map of the vault in his boot. Iris found it, folded it very calmly, and handed it to the guards. I did not ask about the map. I watched the raiders instead. Their clothes were plain, but their boots had the same soft soles as Drake's old crew, not the same men, same training, same habits, same way of looking toward exits before looking toward threats. Drake was sealed under the Academy. His crew was supposed to be gone. But shadows do not disappear just because the man holding the lantern gets caught. That night, I did not go to the training field. I went to the workshop. Logan had locked the door, then forgotten he had locked it, then gotten trapped inside and decided that meant he lived there now. I knocked. Something exploded softly. He opened the door with goggles over one eye and a scorch mark across his forehead shaped like a question mark. I asked if he was busy. He said he was always busy, but if I had brought cursed metal, snacks, or both, he could make time. I set the sealed chandelier cage on his table. Every tool on the table slid away from it as if tools had instincts. Logan leaned close. I pulled him back by the collar. He said he was only looking. I said that was how he looked at bow number 8 before it expressed an opinion in the ceiling. Cole arrived 5 minutes later because the Academy had become terrible at keeping secrets, and Iris arrived 1 minute after him because she was better at not pretending. We stood around the sealed fragment while the workshop lamps flickered. Iris said the raiders were not after money. Cole said stealing a decay fragment sounded like a money problem to him. Iris shook her head. The fragment could not be sold easily. It corrupted containers, destroyed buyers, and made every normal black market dealer run in the opposite direction while praying to whatever gate spirit still answered calls. Someone wanted to use it. Logan said that was worse, but more interesting. Iris told him to find a way to make it less interesting. He saluted with a screwdriver. The map from the Raiders' boot had 3 marked points: the Academy Vault, an old transit gate under the city, a place called the Mirror Foundry. The first point had failed. The second point was where someone could move stolen relics without using the main streets. The The third point was where they were likely building something. No one had to say we were going. Cole did anyway, because he enjoyed ruining dramatic silence. The old transit gate was buried below the abandoned rail district. Before gates became common, the city had built tunnels for cargo carts and emergency routes. After gates appeared, half the tunnels were sealed, half were forgotten, and the rest became perfect places for criminals to make terrible decisions without weather bothering them. We entered before dawn. Iris went first, Cole followed. Logan stayed in the middle wearing a backpack full of devices that clicked whenever he lied about them being safe. I walked last because anything trying to ambush us from behind deserved a creative education. The tunnel smelled like wet stone, rust, and old magic. I collected everything. Rust flakes from the wall, broken rail spikes, a cracked lantern, pebbles shaped like teeth, a dead beetle shell because Logan said it had interesting hardness and I was too tired to argue. Cole asked if I was planning to defeat criminals with tunnel crumbs. I told him tunnel crumbs had carried me emotionally. The first trap went off under his foot. A line of purple fire snapped across the tunnel, forming a cage around us. Cole froze with one boot still on the trigger tile. Iris did not move. Logan whispered that the rune pattern was a compression snare and definitely not something we should touch. I touched it with a fired rock. The rock hit the purple fire and vanished. Not burned, stored. The trap had swallowed it. I smiled. A storage trap. Someone had built a rune net that captured objects crossing the line and held them in a pocket space until released. Very clever, very expensive, very rude. Also very familiar. A quiver that stores things can recognize another mouth. I opened a gate and fired another rock at the trap, then a nail, then a spoon, then 3 feathers from the dead pillow. The purple lines swallowed each one. Cole asked why I was feeding the trap. I said I wanted it full. The lines brightened. The rune pattern trembled. I kept firing junk. Rust flakes, beetle shell, cracked lantern glass, chalk dust, a chair leg from my collection that had survived 3 fights and deserved purpose. The trap whined. Logan started laughing before anyone else understood. He said pocket spaces hate uneven volume. The purple cage bulged outward. I fired the final piece, a wet lump of glue sap wrapped around a pebble. The trap swallowed it. The pocket space burped. Everything it had captured shot back out at once. Not at us. At the rune anchors. I had angled every shot so the returning objects struck the symbols from inside their own pattern. The purple cage shattered, and a storm of junk blasted down the tunnel ahead. 3 hidden raiders who had been waiting behind an illusion wall got hit by my recycled trash avalanche. One took the chair leg to the stomach. One got wrapped in glue feathers. One screamed because the dead beetle shell had landed in his mouth. Cole looked at me. I told him tunnel crumbs had range. He tied the raiders with their own rope and left glowing signal stones for the guards to follow. Iris asked one question before we moved on. Who taught you the return angle? I said Spite. She accepted that like it was a legitimate school. Deeper in the tunnel, the old transit gate waited. It did not look like the clean gates the academy used. It was a ring of black stone set into a wall, half flooded, its surface rippling like dirty glass. The map had marked it as a passage, but the gate was locked by 3 rotating wheels around the edge. Each wheel had weapon symbols carved into it. Sword, bow, hammer, spear, shield, chain, dagger, axe. Cole stepped forward. The spear symbol lit when his weapon got close. Then the gate rejected him so hard he slid backward on his heels. Iris tried her sword. Rejected. Logan held up a wrench. The gate made a sound that felt insulting. Then everyone looked at me. I looked at the quiver. The quiver had no symbol. Of course it did not. Nobody respected storage until storage started shooting back. I raised one hand and opened a dozen gates in a circle around the transit lock. From each gate, I fired a different object into a different symbol. Knife into dagger. Chain link into chain. Rock into hammer because spiritually, a hammer is just an organized rock. A broken pot lid into shield. Cole's chipped spearhead into spear. An old training arrow into bow. The sword was harder. I fired Drake's sealed blade memory. Not the fragment, not the curse, just the shape the quiver had remembered from every time I had dodged it. A ghostly thin line flashed into the sword symbol. The lock trembled. All 3 wheels spun. The gate opened. Logan whispered that my weapon just lied to architecture. I said architecture started it. We passed through. For one cold breath, the world stretched. Then we stepped into the mirror foundry. It was not a normal dungeon. It was an underground factory built inside a gate space, a huge cavern where molten glass flowed in rivers and reflected the ceiling like liquid stars. Towers of mirrors rose from metal platforms. Conveyor chains carried weapon molds through blue flame. Every surface showed us from a different angle, thinner, taller, older, stranger. The air rang with hammers that no hands were holding. At the far end of the foundry, raiders moved between machines. Dozens of them. No names, no banners, no speeches. Just stolen gear, stolen relics, stolen confidence. And in the center, above a pit of glowing glass, hung a half-built weapon frame shaped like a bow. My stomach tightened. The frame was huge, made of black metal ribs and mirror plates. It had no string, no grip, no arrow rest. It did not need them. It was being built to fire stored weapons. Someone had seen what my quiver could do and tried to make a copy. Not a living quiver. A machine. A cannon that could swallow stolen relics and launch them until the city became a graveyard with better lighting. Logan stopped breathing for a second. Then he whispered that the design was ugly. That was how I knew he was angry. Iris signaled us down behind a stack of glass molds. We watched. Raiders were testing the machine with ordinary weapons. Swords dropped into a feeder box, passed through the mirror frame, and shot out as shining projectiles into a wall of stone. Each shot hit with the force of a siege bolt. Then one weapon came out wrong. It twisted midair and exploded into silver shards. The raiders ducked. The machine screamed. Logan smiled without humor. He said they copied the stomach without copying the digestion. I understood. The quiver did not simply store objects. It recognized weight, shape, intent, damage, history, and whatever weird flavor made a cursed scroll different from old paper. The machine was trying to force everything into one pattern. That meant it was unstable. That meant it could be tricked. Iris wanted to wait for guards. She was right. She was responsible. She was also looking at 100 raiders and a weapon that might be loaded with the decay fragments missing dust. If the machine fired once through the city gate, guards would arrive to crater. So I gave her my best, innocent look. She said no. I said I had not spoken. She said my face had. Cole gripped his spear and asked how loud the plan was. I looked at the glass rivers, the mirror towers, the weapon feeder, the conveyor chains, the smoke vents, the cooling racks, the reflection angles, the raiders' patrol routes, and the giant copycat bow hanging above the pit. Then I smiled. Very loud. The first thing I fired was not a weapon. It was a coin. The coin shot from a tiny gate, bounced off one mirror, then another, ringing like a bell each time. Raiders turned toward the sound. The coin struck the control lever on a cooling rack. A sheet of fresh glass dropped. It did not break. It slid onto the conveyor belt and passed in front of the feeder box right as a raider loaded 3 stolen swords. The machine swallowed swords and glass together. Then it fired. 3 sword projectiles shot into the target wall, each wrapped in a mirror coating. Instead of stabbing through the stone, they reflected off it. The raiders screamed as their own test shots bounced backward across the platform. One sword cut the rope, holding a crate of weapons. The crate spilled into another conveyor. Another sword sliced a smoke pipe. Black steam hissed across the floor. The third sword ricocheted into a bell chain. The entire foundry gonged. Everyone looked up. I stepped out from behind the molds and waved. I said their machine needed quality control. 100 raiders reached for weapons. Cole sighed. Then he charged. Iris moved beside him like a silver shadow. Logan stayed behind me and muttered that if anyone scratched the wrong cable, the entire place might fold inward. I asked if that was bad. He said usually. The raiders rushed us across 3 bridges. I opened the gate arsenal. Not fully, not like the training field would see later. Just a curved halo behind my back, 20 portals wide, each one spinning with stored junk and dangerous memories. I fired rocks at the bridge chains. The rocks did not break the chains, they rang them. Vibration traveled through the suspended bridges. Raiders lost their footing. Cole dashed across the shaking metal like he had been born on a collapsing roof. His spear cracked left and right, knocking weapons out of hands, pushing enemies toward the bridge rails. I fired glue sap along the rails. The raiders tried to jump away and stuck themselves in heroic poses. One threw an axe at me. I fired a mirror shard into the flat of the axe. The axe reflected sideways and hit his friend's belt buckle. The belt snapped. The friend tripped. 3 more fell over him. This was not combat anymore. This was choreography with consequences. A raider with twin blades sprinted along the wall, using metal boots to cling to the mirror surface. He moved fast. Too fast to hit directly. So I fired dust at his reflection. The mirror showed him a split instant ahead because of the foundry's weird magic delay. The dust struck the reflection's eyes, and somehow his real eyes blinked. He missed a step and slid down the wall. Cole caught him with the butt of his spear and launched him into a barrel of cooling sand. Another raider pulled out a curse scroll. I had seen that posture before. People with curse scrolls always hold them like they are about to read poetry at a funeral. I fired a wet cloth into his mouth. The chant turned into a confused gargle. Then I fired the scroll tube out of his hand, swallowed it into the quiver midair, and launched it back open behind him. The curse activated on the nearest target. That target was his own shadow. His shadow jumped up, slapped him across the face, and pinned him to the floor. Logan shouted that he wanted to study that. I told him no. Iris said good. Then the copycat machine turned toward us. Raiders had stopped trying to fight fair. One of them climbed the control platform and shoved an entire rack of weapons into the feeder. Swords, axes, chains, spears, monster claws, bottles of flame oil. The mirror bow opened. The air compressed. Logan went pale. He said that much mixed intent would make the shot split. I asked how many ways. He said enough. The machine fired. A storm of weapon light exploded toward us. I could not dodge all of it, so I made the storm think it had already arrived. I opened the gate arsenal wider and fired every reflective thing I had collected. Mirror shards, polished coins, glass chips, a broken helmet visor, the shiny spoon that had ruined a crossbow, even a piece of the chandelier crystal. They spread in a curved wall ahead of us. The incoming weapon light hit the reflections and saw 100 false targets. Half the storm split toward ghosts. The other half still came through. I fired pillow feathers next. Explosive shots are dramatic, sacred shots are powerful, boss bones are terrifying. But never underestimate the tactical value of betting. Feathers expanded into a soft white cloud. Weapon light entered it and slowed, wrapped in absurd fluff. Cole cut down the shots that made it through. Iris drew 3 clean arcs and erased the rest from our path. 1 flame bottle slipped between them. I fired a lightning rod into it. The rod pierced the bottle, caught the spark, and dragged the explosion upward into the ceiling vents. The vents roared. Blue fire shot across the roof of the foundry. Every raider looked up at once. I had 3 seconds of confusion. That was basically a holiday. I fired chain hooks into the main conveyor, into the mirror bow frame, and into the platform anchors. Then I pulled. The quiver did not give me muscles, it gave me angles. A chain from one portal pulled down, another pulled sideways, another pulled from behind the target. The force multiplied through the gates like a crowd of invisible giants, helping with bad ideas. The copycat bow groaned. Metal ribs bent. Mirror plates cracked. The raider on the control platform shouted for everyone to hold the frame steady. They rushed to support it. Exactly what I wanted. I fired glue sap at their boots. Now they were part of the support structure. Cole saw it and laughed in a way that made the raiders more frightened than my weapons did. The machine tried to fire again. The bent frame aimed at the ceiling. Logan shouted that if it released there, the blast would break the gate roof and drop molten glass on everyone. I hated when plans grew extra problems. I opened a gate under the feeder box and fired something inside. Not a weapon. A roasted nut. Small, hard, completely disrespectful. The machine swallowed it with the next batch of stolen swords. The feeder pattern stuttered. A system designed for weapons had to interpret a snack. It tried to turn the nut into ammunition. The mirror bow made a confused cracking noise. Then it fired the roasted nut with enough force to punch through its own alignment crystal. The crystal shattered. The machine's aim dropped from the ceiling to the empty glass river below. The full blast released into molten glass. For 1 second, the river became a sun. Then the molten glass erupted upward as a wave of glowing liquid mirrors. That sounded deadly. It would have been, if I had not already collected cooling sand. I opened every small gate I could manage and fired sand in a wide fan. Logan threw 2 cold capsules into the stream. Iris sliced the wave into thinner sheets. Cole used his spear like a windmill, scattering heat and cursing the entire concept of glass. Molten mirrors cooled in midair into curved plates that fell around us like shining shields. The raiders behind the machine were trapped inside a maze of fresh glass walls. They could see us. They could not reach us. I walked up to the nearest wall and tapped it. The raider behind it raised his weapon. I raised one finger. He attacked. His blade bounced off the glass and hit his own forehead with the handle. I told him that counted as surrender. The foundry was not finished with us. Deep below the platform, something began to move. The copycat machine's failed blast had awakened whatever powered the place. The molten river dropped, draining into a circular pit. Mirrors across the cavern turned one by one, all reflecting the same dark shape rising from below. A boss. Because criminals cannot just rent a normal basement. The thing climbed out of the pit on 6 bladed legs, its body made of glass armor and furnace flame. It had no face, only a mask of mirrors that showed each of us dying in a different way. The mirror mantis unfolded its arms. Each arm was a blade longer than a cart. Logan whispered that the foundry core had taken a guardian form. Cole said it looked breakable. Iris said everything looked breakable to him. The mantis moved. No warning, no roar, just vanished from the pit and appeared on the bridge above us. Its blade came down. I opened gates and fired boss bones, chains, and holy wax all at once. The mantis did not block. It reflected. Every projectile hit its mirror armor and shot away at a new angle. The boss bone shattered a catwalk behind us. Chains wrapped a pillar. Holy wax splattered across a ceiling beam and burned a very judgmental hole. The mantis tilted its face at me. My own reflection in its mask smiled half a second before I did. Magic delay again. That was bad. If it could reflect my attacks and read delayed reflections, then every direct shot became a gift. So I stopped attacking it. I attacked the room. I fired chains into overhead cranes and pulled them loose. I fired rocks into mirror towers, cracking them just enough to change angles. I fired glass dust across the floor. I fired old rail spikes into conveyor gears. The foundry became a storm of moving parts. The mantis dashed through it all, blades slicing falling metal, legs skipping over broken mirrors. Cole engaged it head-on because he had many talents and fear was not one of them. His spear struck the mantis leg, sparked, slid, and almost got cut in half. Iris attacked from the other side, her sword lines trying to find seams between mirror plates. The mantis reflected her blade light back at her. She twisted aside, but a line cut her sleeve. I did not like that. A cold feeling opened behind my ribs. The gate arsenal widened without my permission. More portals appeared behind me. 30, 40, 50. Concept fusion unstable. The words flashed in my head like a warning label from someone who did not know me very well. I shoved the feeling down. Not yet. Power without timing is just noise. The mantis leaped at Logan. That was its mistake. Logan yelped and threw a wrench. The wrench bounced off the mantis mask. I opened a gate behind the wrench, swallowed it, and fired it back through a lightning rod, wrapped in chain, coated in glue sap and tipped with a mirror shard. A ridiculous combination. A beautiful combination. The wrench struck the mantis mask and stuck. The mirror shard made the mask reflect itself. The lightning rod carried the foundry's static charge. The glue held it all in place. For one heartbeat, the mantis saw its own delayed reflection inside its own face. It froze. Cole did not waste the opening. He drove his spear into the joint below its left blade arm. Iris cut the opposite joint. Both arms cracked but did not break. The mantis shrieked, and every mirror in the cavern answered. Reflections stepped out. Not full monsters. Copies. One Cole made of glass. One Iris made of silver smoke. One Logan made of flickering sparks and immediate regret. And one Maze. The copy of me had a mirror quiver on its back. It smiled. I hated it instantly. Mirror Jace lifted his hand. Behind him, mirror gates opened. They were not real storage gates. They were reflections of mine, weak copies, but they could still fire whatever the foundry had seen me shoot. Rocks, chains, knives, dust, feathers. The first volley came at us. I caught the rocks with gates and fired them aside. Cole fought his glass copy, furious that it copied his smirk wrong. Iris jeweled hers in silence so sharp the air seemed afraid. Logan ran from his spark copy, while yelling that it was an inaccurate personality model. My copy watched me carefully. That was the problem. It had my posture, my timing, my bad habit of noticing small things. So I gave it something small. I dropped my hand. It dropped its hand. I leaned left. It leaned left. I smiled. It smiled. Then I fired nothing. Not a hidden shot. Not a delayed attack. Nothing. Mirror Jace copied the motion and fired nothing too. But its fake gates still opened. And when empty gates opened in a mirror foundry, they reflected whatever was behind them. Behind Mirror Jace was the mantis. Its own gates reflected the boss's furnace core straight into its back. The copy burned from the inside and shattered. I bowed to myself. Cole shouted that I had just tricked my reflection into friendly fire. I said I was my own worst enemy, but only briefly. With my copy gone, I could focus on the boss. Mantis had one blade arm cracked, one joint smoking, and a wrench glued to its face. It was still faster than all of us. The room was against it now, though. Every mirror I had cracked gave me angle options. Every chain I had hooked gave me pull points. Every glass wall around trapped raiders gave me bouncing lines. I opened the gate arsenal in a full half circle. The portals did not just float behind me. They rotated, aligning with mirrors across the cavern. One projectile could become 20. 20 could become 100. 100 could become a very bad day. I fired one pebble. It hit a mirror shard, bounced into a gate, emerged from another gate, struck a cooling plate, bounced through a glass wall, entered a portal behind the mantis, and hit the wrench stuck to its face. Tiny tap. The wrench rang. The lightning rod charge inside it pulsed. Every mirror reflection of the wrench rang too. The mantis's mask cracked in a spiderweb pattern. I fired the second pebble. Same path. More speed. The mask shattered. The furnace core inside was exposed. Cole jumped. Iris jumped. The mantis tried to reflect them, but without its mask, it only reflected heat. I fired cooling sand at its core. The furnace flame hardened around the sand, forming a brittle shell. Cole's spear hit first. Iris's sword hit second. I fired the Academy medal through the crack. The medal struck the core and rang like the selection bell. The mantis froze. Then every mirror in the foundry showed the same image. Me standing at the altar with a useless quiver while everyone laughed. Then me firing a brick. Then me beating Cole. Then me trapping Drake. Then me opening gates behind my back. The mantis tried to reflect my history back at me like it was a weapon. Big mistake. I had already survived it. I opened the quiver and swallowed the reflection. Not the memory, not the emotion. The image. Foundry's mirror magic poured into the gate arsenal, and suddenly every portal behind me gleamed with a reflective edge. I understood the fusion instantly. Mirror plus projectile. A shot that could carry a reflection of another shot. A fake that hit like a real thing if the target believed the angle. Ridiculous. Cool. Dangerous. Mine. I fired one boss bone. The bone flew straight for the mantis core. The mantis raised its remaining blade to block. The bone's reflection split away from it, curved around the blade, and hit first. The real bone hit second. The core cracked. Then every mirrored copy of that bone hit from every surface in the room. The mantis exploded into glass petals and furnace sparks. A shockwave rolled through the foundry. The trapped raiders shouted behind their glass walls. The copycat bow groaned, half melted and bent over the pit. The whole gate space began to collapse inward. Logan stared at the ruined machine with heartbreak. I told him not to fall in love with enemy hardware. He said he could fix it. Iris said he would not. He asked if he could fix it after it was evidence. Iris looked at him. He said never mind. We had minutes, maybe less. The raiders were trapped, the foundry was unstable, the transit gate behind us had begun flickering. If we left them, they would die. If we rescued them badly, they would escape. If we waited for guards, the gate would become a fancy tomb. So I did what I always did. I made the problem attack itself. I opened gates beside every glass prison wall. I fired tiny cracks into the corners, not enough to free the raiders, just enough to weaken the panels. Then I fired chain loops through the cracks and around the raiders' wrists and ankles. The chains tied them together in groups like terrible parade decorations. Cole and Iris cut through the glass walls in controlled lines. As each group fell out, my chains yanked them onto a conveyor belt. The belt carried them toward the transit gate. They shouted threats. I fired wet cloth into mouths. Much quieter. Logan rigged a pulse device to the gate wheel, keeping the exit open while sparks crawled over his gloves. He looked delighted and terrified, which for him was basically professional focus. The foundry ceiling cracked. Molten glass began dripping like slow rain. A raider broke one hand free and grabbed a fallen dagger. He lunged at me from the conveyor. I let him. He crossed the line from trapped criminal to active attacker right in front of Iris, Cole, Logan, and every other raider witness. Then I opened a gate under his foot and fired a pillow upward. The pillow launched him into the air, turned sideways, expanded, and slapped him into a cooling sand pile. The dagger landed at my feet. I swallowed it into the quiver. I told him I was keeping that for court. Cole said I sounded like Iris. I apologized to myself. We shoved the last raider through the transit gate as the mirror foundry folded behind us. The copycat bow collapsed into the glass river. The furnace pit closed like an eye. The final thing I saw was my reflection in a falling mirror shard, smiling back at me with one extra gate behind its shoulder. Then the transit gate spat us into the old tunnel. The tied raiders landed in a heap. The guards who had followed Iris's signal stones were waiting. Their captain looked at the pile of criminals, then at us, then at the smoke leaking from the gate. He asked what happened. Cole pointed at me. Logan pointed at me. Iris did not point, which felt worse. I said there had been a manufacturing defect. The guards took the raiders away. None of them were dead. Most were glued, bruised, terrified of pillows, or trapped in their own shadow curses. The evidence was clear. Stolen relic maps, stolen weapons. The copycat designed sketches Logan had grabbed while pretending not to grab anything. The city would call it a successful raid. I called it a missed training session. But the mirror magic did not fade from my quiver. I felt it all night. Every object inside now had a faint reflection trailing behind it, not a duplicate, not free ammo, something stranger. A memory of direction. A rock remembered the wall it bounced from. A chain remembered the wrist it had bound. A spoon remembered the crossbow it had embarrassed. That was either power or a sign I needed sleep. Probably both. The next morning, the academy tried to make me rest. This failed because Logan knocked on my door before sunrise carrying 3 metal rings, 2 bags of sand, a mirror shard in a sealed pouch, and the expression of a man about to commit science. I opened the door. He said gate arsenal testing. I said sleep. He said unstable concept fusion. I said breakfast. He said mirror trajectory multiplication. I was already putting on my boots. Cole was waiting in the training field, pretending he had not arrived early. Iris stood by the fence, pretending she was only there to prevent casualties. Targets had been arranged at different distances: stone blocks, moving dummies, suspended rings, shield plates, and one extremely nervous scarecrow wearing a spare helmet. Logan placed the metal rings in the air using small anchor rods. He said they would help measure portal alignment. I asked if they would explode. He said not on their own. I hated that answer. I opened a small gate and fired a pebble through the first ring. The pebble hit the target. Normal. Then its reflection hit the target from the side. The target spun. Then the memory of its bounce hit the back of the target. The target fell over. Cole crossed his arms. He said one pebble had become rude in 3 directions. Good. Next test. I fired a chain link at a moving dummy. The link struck its shoulder and bounced away. The reflection of the link wrapped around the dummy's arm like a faint silver loop. The memory of the chain pulled where the real chain was not. The dummy stumbled into the path of the next dummy. Both fell. Logan wrote so fast his pencil snapped. Iris said the reflections were weak but precise. Weak was fine. Precision was where comedy became violence. I fired dust into the air. Dust reflection formed a false cloud 3 steps to the left. A target dummy turned toward the false cloud because its detection charm read movement there. The real dust drifted into its sensor and blinded it. Cole said that was disgusting. I said thank you. Then we tested knives. A thrown knife was dangerous. A reflected knife was annoying. A knife with a remembered bounce path was art. I fired one knife between 3 stone pillars. The real blade curved through a portal and cut the rope holding a weight. Its reflection made a fake cut on the opposite rope, causing the training charm to shift defense there. The memory path hit the true rope from behind. 2 weights dropped. The dummy ducked the fake one and got flattened by the real one. Cole laughed so hard he had to sit down. Iris did not laugh, but her mouth twitched. Logan shouted that I had invented tactical lying. I had always practiced tactical lying. I had just become ranged. The fun ended when the scarecrow exploded. Not from my shot. From the ground under it. A black spike rose through the target, shattered the helmet, and opened like a flower made of obsidian teeth. Everyone went still. The spike pulsed once. Then the training field cracked in a straight line, leading toward the academy wall. Iris drew her sword. Cole lifted his spear. Logan said he had not done that, which was honestly the first thing I needed confirmed. Another spike burst from the ground. Then another. The academy alarms screamed again. At first, I thought the mirror foundry collapse had followed us. Then a gate opened above the field. Small, rugged, black around the edges. From it fell a bone arrow as long as a wagon. It struck the ground where I had been standing a second earlier and buried itself halfway into the field. The shaft was carved from boss bone. The head was made from black mirror glass. And tied around it was a strip of cloth from the raider crew. A message without words. The remnants were not finished. I looked up at the ragged gates. Something moved beyond it. A tower floor, a dungeon pocket, a storage chamber, I could not tell. Then the gate closed. The bone arrow remained. Cole asked if criminals had just challenged me to an archery contest. I pulled the arrow from the ground with 3 chains and fed it into the quiver. The quiver swallowed it slowly. It tasted wrong. Not cursed like Drake's blade, not holy like the grave paladin, not reflective like the foundry. Hungry. Logan inspected the hole it left in the field and said the gate signature came from the sky rail. I had heard of it, but only in warnings. An old aerial dungeon route floated above the city's outer ruins, a broken series of platforms and rail bridges once used by high-rank hunters to move between gates. After too many flying monsters nested there, the route was abandoned. Perfect place for raiders to hide after losing their foundry. Perfect place to fire giant bone arrows at my academy like sore losers. Iris said the guards would organize a raid. The sky rail fired a second bone arrow before she finished speaking. This one aimed at the workshop tower. Logan made a noise like a kettle, realizing it had enemies. I opened the gate arsenal. 50 portals snapped behind me. I fired the first bone arrow back. Not at the second arrow. At its reflection in the training field's cracked target mirror. The reflected paths bent upward. The bone arrow I fired became a silver-streaked blur and struck the incoming arrow from below. Both exploded into fragments over the courtyard. I opened more gates and caught the fragments before they hit anyone. A rain of boss bone entered the quiver. My back felt heavier. My smile got wider. They had sent me ammunition. That was thoughtful. The third arrow did not come. The raiders had learned enough not to feed me twice. So we went to them. The sky rail gate stood on a ruined watchtower outside the city. Wind screamed through broken stone. Far above, platforms floated between clouds, connected by rails that curved through the sky like black ribbons. The gate shimmered open when Iris activated the old key. She told me the objective was simple. Disable the raider weapon, capture survivors, do not collapse the rail. She looked directly at me for the last part. I said no promises. Cole said that was not comforting. Logan handed me a compact wrist frame and told me it was not a bow. It looked like a bow that had been stepped on by a smarter bow. He said it stabilized gate direction during high wind. I asked if I needed it. He said no. Then he said yes if I wanted my shots to stop turning into abstract weather. I wore it. We entered the sky rail. The first step nearly threw me off the platform. Wind hit like a monster's shoulder. Clouds rolled below us. The city looked tiny beneath the rails, all rooftops and glittering wards. Head-broken platforms floated at different heights, some steady, some tilting, some spinning slowly around old magic cores. And on the far platform, surrounded by raider flags with no symbols, stood a bone ballista. It was built from boss ribs, mirror plates, and black rail spikes. A giant quiver box behind it held more bone arrows. The raiders had made a weapon that fired boss remains across the sky. I respected the drama. I objected to the target selection. Flying monsters circled overhead, drawn by the noise. Winged wolves with blade feathers, serpents made of cloud and teeth, huge birds with skull masks. The raiders were not controlling them. They were using the chaos as cover. That meant the sky rail was about to become a three-way fight. Excellent. I opened a gate and fired a rock at the nearest rail joint. The rock bounced, reflected, and tapped the metal 3 times in different places. The rail began to vibrate. Every flying monster turned toward the sound. Then I fired a pouch of monster bait powder into the wind above the raider platform. The powder vanished into the gale. For 2 seconds, nothing happened. Then every winged beast in the sky changed direction. Cole looked at me. I said I preferred enemies with enthusiasm. The raiders saw the flock coming and panicked. Some aimed at the monsters, some aimed at us. The bone ballista began turning slowly, trying to choose a target. I ran along the rail. Not the platform. The rail. It was narrow, slick, and wildly unsafe, but portals gave me balance if I fired in the right rhythm. A pebble shot left nudged me right. A chain fired downward pulled me over gaps. A feather burst slowed each landing. I was not running so much as arguing with gravity and winning on technical style. Cole chased behind me using his spear as a balancing pole. He shouted that this was stupid. I shouted that it was working. A winged wolf dove at me. I fired a mirror shard into its path. The wolf saw 3 copies of me and bit the wrong one. I jumped onto its back for half a second, fired glue sap onto its feathers, then kicked away as it spun into 2 more wolves. The 3 tangled monsters crashed into a raider watchpost. The watchpost folded. Raiders scattered. Iris took the lower bridge, cutting through anyone who tried to flank us. She moved calmly even with clouds below her feet, like falling was something other people had to worry about. Logan stayed near the entry gate with signal flares, shouting advice that was technically useful and emotionally alarming. The bone ballista fired. The arrow crossed the sky toward the city. I opened the gate arsenal behind me, but the wind bent the portals. The shot was too far, too fast. Then I remembered the rail. The whole sky rail was a line. A weapon pass. I fired a chain into the rail under my feet and another into the rail near the ballista platform. The portals connected through the metal vibration. For one instant, I felt the entire route as a single bowstring stretched across the sky. I pulled, not with my arms, with gates. 100 tiny forces tugged the rail, changing its vibration. The bone arrow in the distance wobbled. I fired a pebble along the rail. It shot forward, riding the vibration faster than any normal projectile, skipping from spike to spike, leaving mirror reflections behind it. The pebble caught the bone arrow halfway to the city. It should have done nothing. But the pebble carried the rail's vibration, the mirror's false angle, and the quiver's stored memory of the previous arrow's path. It tapped the arrowhead. The arrow turned. Just a little. Enough. It missed the city wall and plunged into the empty river beyond the outer ruins, exploding in a harmless column of water. The raiders stared. I stared too. Then I pretended I had known it would work. Cole reached me, breathing hard, and said my lies were getting bigger. I told him so were my targets. We landed on the main raider platform as the flying monsters crashed into the defenses. Chaos unfolded beautifully. Raiders swung blades at wolves. Wolves bit ballista ropes. Cloud serpents wrapped around rail towers. Skull birds dropped stones from above, because apparently even monsters understood ranged harassment. I had to capture criminals and not let the monsters eat them. Annoying balance. I fired chain nets into the crowd, wrapping raiders and yanking them away from monster jaws. Then I fired sleep powder at the monsters, but the wind scattered it, so I shot mirror dust first to create false wind paths. The powder followed the reflections and burst right under the wolves' noses. 3 wolves dropped asleep midair. I opened pillow gates below them. They landed softly on raiders. Everyone lost. The ballista crew tried to reload. I fired a roasted nut into the crank. The crank jammed. The crew pulled harder. The nut snapped, the crank released, and all 3 crew members spun around the wheel like laundry. Cole took out 2 raiders trying to cut them free, then looked at me and asked why the nut thing kept working. I said because enemies never respect snacks. A cloud serpent lunged at Iris from behind. I fired a lightning rod through its open mouth. The rod pierced Cloud, drew static from the storm around the platform, and lit the serpent from the inside. It did not die, it sneezed lightning. The lightning struck the ballista's mirror plates. The plates overloaded. The entire weapon lit up. Logan shouted from the far platform that overloaded mirror plates were going to discharge. I asked where. He shouted everywhere. I opened every gate I could. The air behind me became a wall of portals, each one catching a different piece of the discharge as the ballista exploded in white-blue light. Electricity, mirror shards, boss bone splinters, rail spikes, flame oil, curses embedded in the arrows, all of it blasted outward. I swallowed what I could, deflected what I could not, reflected what I did not trust. One bolt slipped through and struck my shoulder. Pain tore down my arm. For a second, my gates flickered. The sky tilted. A raider saw me stumble and charged with a serrated sword. Good. Evil people are so helpful when they confuse pain with weakness. I let him come close. Then I fired the lightning in my shoulder back through the metal frame on my wrist. The bolt shot from my palm, not as clean magic, but as a crooked electric chain. It wrapped around his sword, ran down the blade, and launched him backward into a pile of his own friends. Every hair on his head stood up. He was alive. Humiliated. Collectible, legally speaking. I added the feeling of shoulder lightning to the quiver. Not an object. A charge. The quiver accepted it with greedy warmth. Concept fusion unstable. The words whispered again. This time I did not shove them down. I shaped them. Lightning plus chain. Mirror plus bone. Wind plus feather. The gate arsenal changed. The portals stretched into long curved slits like a storm opening its eyes behind me. I fired one chain. It split into reflected chains, each carrying a flicker of lightning. They whipped across the platform, avoiding allies, wrapping raiders, shocking weapons out of hands, and tying everyone to the rail posts. Then I fired feathers into the wind. Feather reflections became tiny gliders under falling monsters and knocked out raiders, slowing them before they could tumble off the platform. Then I fired boss bone shards into the ballista remains. Their mirror reflections struck from opposite angles, breaking the weapon frame apart without sending debris toward the city. The platform shook. The ballista died. The raiders were captured. Monsters either slept, fled, or dangled in chain nets, looking deeply confused about their career choices. I stood in the middle of the sky rail with smoke rising from my sleeve and 100 gates fading behind me. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Logan's voice came through a signal charm, asking if I had just used atmospheric feather breaking. I told him yes. He made a sound that might have been joy or a small internal collapse. Iris ordered the guards through the entry gate. Cole clapped me on the back, then remembered my shoulder was burned and pretended he had been checking my posture. I told him he was a terrible liar. He said I had enough lying talent for both of us. The raid should have ended there. The ballista was gone, the raiders were tied up, the sky rail was damaged but stable. Then the main platform detached. No villain speech, no dramatic laugh, just a deep metallic crack as the old anchors finally failed from years of neglect, monster impact, and maybe my aggressive relationship with vibration. The entire platform began falling. Raiders screamed. Guards shouted. Cole grabbed a rail post. Iris stabbed her sword into the platform and held on. Logan, still on the entry platform, shouted something about terminal velocity that did not improve morale. Below us was the outer ruin district. If the platform fell there, it would crush abandoned buildings, sure, but also release dozens of tide raiders, sleeping monsters, unstable ballista scraps, and my reputation for not dropping sky objects on neighborhoods. I had caught arrows. I had caught chandeliers. I had not caught a platform. Yet, I opened the gate arsenal until my vision blurred. Portals spread below the platform, above it, around it, through broken rail lines, across every remaining anchor point. I fired chains into distant towers. I fired hooks into floating debris. I fired mirror shards into the clouds to mark angles. I fired feathers into the wind until the air turned white. The platform kept falling. Too heavy. Too fast. My arms shook even though I was not holding the weight directly. The gates screamed in my head. Cole saw what I was doing and ran to the broken edge. He drove his spear into a chain loop and pushed, adding his strength to the pull. Iris cut falling debris away so my chains did not snap. Logan activated every metal ring he had brought for testing, throwing them through the gate from the entry platform. The rings locked around my chain lines and stabilized them in the air. The falling slowed. Not enough. I needed a cushion. I looked at the quiver. It held pillow feathers, wind, mirror direction, lightning charge, boss bones, rail vibration, glue sap, cooling sand, chains, and the memory of every time someone had laughed because I had no bow. Fine. Let them laugh at this. I fired every pillow I had ever stored. All three. Then I fired their reflections. Then I fired the memory of their softness through feather, wind, and mirror multiplication. Below the falling platform, a ridiculous white cloud opened across the sky. It looked like a bed made for a sleeping giant. The platform hid it. The cloud compressed. For one terrifying second, I thought it would burst. Then glue sap threaded through the feathers, chains held the edges, wind lifted from below, and lightning charged the whole cushion into a trembling field of force. The platform bounced. Not high, just enough to kill the fall. It settled onto the outer ruins with a sound like a mountain landing on a mattress. Dust rose. Silence followed. Then one tied raider, hanging upside down from a chain, asked if he was dead. I told him no, but he had lost to betting. Cole laughed until he coughed. Even Iris looked away for a second. The guards took control of the platform. The raiders were marched to jail in long lines, still tangled in electric chains. The monsters were contained and moved through safe gates. The broken ballista pieces were sealed as evidence, though Logan managed to rescue one mirror plate, 3 gear teeth, and a spring before Iris noticed. I noticed too. I said nothing. A craftsman with stolen enemy parts was dangerous. A craftsman on our side with stolen enemy parts was also dangerous, but funnier. By sunset, the city had a new rumor. The Quiver Kid had caught the sky. That was exaggerated. I had only caught a platform. The sky was still up there, and I was not emotionally ready to fight it. After the sky rail, the academy tried again to make me rest. This time I almost listened. Almost. Because the gate arsenal had evolved during real battles, swallowed mirror memories, stolen machine angles, lightning chains, feather wind, boss bone arrows, rail vibration. And enough criminal regret to fill a warehouse. If I did not test it properly, the next fight would be the test, and I had learned not to let enemies design my lessons. So only after the vault raid, the mirror foundry, and the skyrail disaster did I finally get my quiet afternoon. That afternoon, I returned to the training field alone. The field was empty except for targets, broken stone blocks, and the long shadow of the academy wall. I stood in the center where I had once been mocked for having no bow. I lifted my hand. Behind me, the air opened. 1 gate. 10. 50. 100 small portals floated in a wide arc, each one holding something impossible. Knives spun beside rocks, chains coiled through lightning, sacred dust glittered around monster teeth. A pillow drifted solemnly among boss bones like it had earned its place. I aimed at the farthest target. I did not draw a string. I did not hold a bow. I just thought release. A single pebble shot out. It crossed the field and tapped the target exactly in the center. A tiny hit. Almost gentle. Then the delayed force arrived. The target, the 3 targets behind it, and the stone wall at the edge of the field exploded outward in a perfect line. Dust rolled across the grass. I lowered my hand. From the fence, Cole said that was excessive. I told him it was calibration. Iris appeared beside him and said I would be rebuilding the wall. Logan popped up from behind a crate and said the data was beautiful. For a moment, it felt like the story could end there. Mocked Kid became the Academy's rising monster. The useless quiver became a gate of infinite weapons. The thief lord was captured. The city was safe. The people who doubted me finally had to look up. That would be a clean ending. But clean endings are for people who do not collect cursed scrolls in a bottomless quiver. That night while the city slept and the academy lights dimmed, I sat on the roof above the weapon hall, watching the stars through the faint shimmer of old gates. The quiver rested beside me. Not on my back. Beside me. I had taken it off for the first time in weeks, but I could still feel every object inside it like thoughts waiting behind a door. A breeze moved across the roof. One portal opened behind me without command. Small, silent. Inside it, I saw the black cemetery grave again. The one with the open eye. This time there was a weapon name carved into it. Quiver. The portal closed before I could move. I stared at the empty air, my pulse slow and heavy. Then I smiled. Because somewhere out there, something had noticed me. And after everything I had survived, after every laugh, every trap, every monster, every villain stupid enough to attack me first, I had learned one thing better than anyone. If something wanted to come for my weapon, it had better bring more than a sword. I had a whole world on my back now. And I was still collecting.